And we are live. Hello and welcome to the first episode of exploring the physics and game theory of HEX.
Oh boy.
I'm MatiAllin, here with FutureUs. Welcome.
Why, thank you very much.
So
I have a cold.
We were having one of the best discussions I've ever had in HEX, really digging down deep and exploring the game theory and trying to match up different levels of physics and really understanding what it means to pay your future self with HEX when you time lock your crypto value. And so it's yeah, I felt kind of bad that we weren't sharing it with anybody else, so we decided to hop on here, even though we've already been talking for probably over an hour, and that way we can just kind of put it on record and do something a little bit different that might be fun, which is kind of a voice only option here, the podcast style. What do you think, FutureUs?
Yeah, it turned out it was a good idea 17 hours ago. That's the time difference between Maddie and I. I'm 17 hours in the future. According to according to Greenwich.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I guess hopefully we saved the best till last. I kind of feel like we've exhausted it all, but these things have a way of doing what they do.
Well, and that's part of the point of doing voice only, is right, to not always have an agenda and to just be speaking freely. I think we were talking about doing a Twitter Spaces room, but decided that this would be a little bit better of a venue. So I know I've got my fancy microphone hooked up again finally, so we're all set.
Yeah, you sound good. You've definitely got a voice for television.
Oh, you're too kind.
A face for radio.
So when we talk about the physics of HEX, and we try to understand, right, like, what are things that we can predict of human behavior? Why is it that Bitcoin worked in the first place, right? It was built on game theory, which is this weird intersection between, being able to predict human behavior and being able to understand the economic incentives involved, and trying to understand those things to the point of having an understanding like any other theory of physics, right?
Yeah, and how kind of simple it all turned out to be in the end.
I disagree with you on that. I will debate.
Okay, that's fine.
But
I mean, obviously the way the game plays out is unpredictable and not simple by any stretch. But the idea that you can have, a relatively small number of incentives aligned this way and that, in the case of, say, Bitcoin. Something's going on. That might be better. I think I had my audio thing doing something funky before.
Okay.
It's well, I remember reading the white paper, the Bitcoin white paper, and
Did you write it?
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Okay, we'll move on.
For
so
reasons,
you were reading it.
For reasons I really can't divulge. Yeah, I remember reading it and thinking, well, for starters, I expected it to be a long dissertation on complicated, cryptographic algorithms and all sorts of things, and it's anything but that. And I got to the end and I was like, well...
Hard enough to have written it. We're dealing with somebody who's extremely intelligent here. Go on, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, is there someone else in the room? Hello? What?
Can you hear me?
I can. But
yeah,
you were talking to someone else?
About you. Yeah, I'm talking about you.
Oh.
FutureUs.
Okay. Yeah, well, that's it's not even really that much of a tangent, because in game theory, there's always unpredictable players that have beliefs that
Yes.
really just don't make any sense to the majority, and yet somehow end up being pivotal in how the whole thing plays out. Uno momento.
No problem. Yeah. So we're here. We're just talking about game theory, trying to do a slightly different format to the show where we're voice only. We're using our fancy microphones to hopefully bring you the best quality auditory experience, and that way you don't have to focus on the screen so much. You can go about your life and listen in.
Yeah. And I have a sexy deep voice, so I'm told, because I have this cold that I'm happy to report, by the way, is not the unspeakable illness. I've had the thing jammed up into the back of my brain. Perfect. I don't know if I'm going to get those brain cells back or not, but
we'll do our best. So,
yes.
So you were saying about how you had read the white paper at first and started to understand the game theory of Bitcoin.
Well, yeah, I mean, like by the time you get, it's too long ago now, but I seem to recall only being about halfway through the meat and potatoes part of it, and thinking, could it really be that simple? I mean, it makes sense. I mean, you've got incentives this way, incentives that way, right? And miners and blah blah blah. You've got the proof of work thing creating the time delay, and the whole thing where it takes computational or some kind of effort that takes time. Most importantly, to come up with some proof. Which is a critical part of the thing. I'm struggling to wonder how much of this to get into, but and then it's asymmetric time-wise, time asymmetric, and that the once the work's been done, you can very cheaply and very quickly verify that the work was done correctly. And that's
the old trapdoor function of elliptical curve cryptography, I suppose.
Yeah, signature creation, encryption, verification, and all that stuff that already existed. But to me, it's always been fascinating that not always, maybe it has always existed, We're still trying to decrypt quantum physics, aren't we?
I understand.
Yeah, it's the time asymmetry that really makes it work. Or resource asymmetry, which is, force exerted over time, I guess.
For Bitcoin, you're saying? Bitcoin
yeah.
Money?
Well, the game theory for these types of systems, these blockchain systems in general, to me it all seems to come back to a kind of a wielding, a control of time, a shaping of the way time plays out, as opposed to it's kind of a one-way time valve. Really.
Wow.
Time can go forward, but it can't go back, which was already true, but it wasn't true in the digital space in terms of the double spend problem.
Yeah.
But then you still have to have the other incentives for people to enforce. Not so much to enforce, but to give a damn, basically, about the need to enforce.
Well, to shape the emergence of, the behavior that is maintaining that part of the system, because what we're really talking about is how computer code interacts with human behavior. Is that right?
I think computer code was just a tool used to materialize or create a system. It's fascinating to me. Some systems have positive feedback loops and others have negative feedback loops. Luckily, most systems in the realms that humans live in have negative feedback loops in the short time frames anyway, which is useful because it allows things to be relatively stable and not blow up into supernovas and things constantly. But there are examples of positive feedback loops, of course. And mining is an interesting one because it kind of gets kick-started in the Bitcoin context, the proof of work solution. It gets
Go on.
kickstarted by it gets kickstarted by the idea of the miners are doing it because they can bring into being things that didn't exist before, and there's some competition involved where you're competing with other miners trying to do the same thing, and that's the starting incentive. And the question might be asked right at the beginning, before all this started, is that enough of an incentive to even get people interested? Well, it turned out, of course, that just from a purely academic point of view, it was clearly interesting enough for a few people to experiment with.
Yes.
And then comes a day where, without going back over the history again, where this thing has some kind of monetary value in the world, and now we find ourselves as miners, if we were. Actually, I wasn't in Bitcoin, so I'll just say the miners, I suppose, found themselves in a position where now they're not only still incentivized to continue mining and creating value, digging virtual gold out of the ground, things that they believe other people will want and that only people with mining equipment can create, and thus mining value into the world, minting value into the world. That incentive remained, but now there's an incentive to actually maintain the network, and at a social level, act to prevent it from being changed or messed with or broken. And that created a whole revolution in and of itself, didn't it? And so it's not just the computer code. It's interesting how the point I was trying to make there is how the initial incentive was clear, but the end goal was something that kind of had to be bootstrapped by the initial incentive to get people invested, to then start the real work of trying to protect, the Holy Grail, as it were.
Which is
the systems that the new system was built upon, making sure that it was decentralized enough, and considering the possibility of physical attack, and all that kind of thing, which is not baked into the protocol, right? Satoshi never wrote, there is a rule that there must be a minimum number of nodes and they must be geographically, dispersed at least this amount. The topic is raised, of course, as obviously the more decentralized it is and the more dispersed and over different legal jurisdictions and geographies and everything else, the better it will be. But there's no programming as to what those numbers should have been.
So I know that this is probably a little bit technically wrong, but just if I didn't know anything, I would ask the question, when did miners and nodes really become different, right? Because I've run a node and it, sits on your computer and you kind of check for double spends, or not necessarily check for double spends, but you have to keep up with which chain is the real chain, and you have to run software and stuff. So in the very beginning, it must have been very similar, right? Because you didn't need to burn so much electricity. It was just kind of theoretically, if people wanted to compete and all show up at the same time and play the same game, then they would be, ending up burning enough electricity, perhaps, that then it would incentivize them to, I guess, create a market and, be playing. It's kind of like a video game, right? That becomes real.
Well, yeah, and in the early days, mining Bitcoin, well, if I put myself in the sort of theoretical shoes of what it would have been like to be one of the early, specifically Bitcoin miners, which I missed by about 3 years, I think it would have been a lot more about having given birth to a system, a game mechanics-based system that one hoped would work and would grow and mature to be, something that would would in fact solve that double spend problem on a continuous basis in perpetuity, which was not, it was theoretically sort of, well, it was never, I mean, how can you theoretically know something, right? But it seemed like the solution had been found, but no one really knew. And so if I were in that position as a kind of just a computer geek or, just someone interested in that space, I would be running a node mining just to be part of the kind of incubator or whatever, the life support system that kept this new creation existing.
Sure.
So that we could move forward and experiment with it. It would be like maintaining the infrastructure.
Would you sell?
Well, it would have had no value to me. It would have had no monetary value to me at all at the time. Purely academic.
Did somebody have to sell in order to give Bitcoin value?
To give it monetary value? Yeah. I mean, yeah. Well, there had to be a transaction, but Bitcoin, the technology in the game theory, in my view, had value long before it had monetary value, because of the because of the problem it was solving, the double spend problem. This idea that online, how do you send money to somebody when it's just copying or changing some ones and zeros? What happens if you send that same quote unquote email? Communication of value transfer to like 10 different places all at once. How do the other 9 places know that, or how do any of them, I should say, know that they actually got the value and someone else didn't? And then when they go to spend it, maybe it's already gone, right? The classic double spend thing. So that had to solve that problem alone has tremendous value for an academic, from an academic point of view, at the very least.
Yeah, I didn't know like what kind of a question that was. I was going to say the answer was by letting Ben Bernanke and all of the ALLin Greenspans and people of the world, by letting them just print as much money as they want, as long as they could pretend to catch double spends or something.
It just wasn't like that. Like, I remember when I got my first computer that had an actual CRT screen, like, instead of just flashing LEDs like the one I built for myself. And by CRT screen, of course, I mean I could plug it into a television. And I didn't know what to do with this thing. In the day, you could get games and things, but they cost money. And you had to get this cassette tape thing and set it all up and beg your mother. And I was like, 9 years old? And so I didn't have any games or anything that came with it. I just had the little book. And there's just something about the thing that it was that just made me go, wow, this is the most amazing thing in the world. And I didn't know anything about it. There was some intuitive idea, though, that a box that you can type things into and instruct and code and create things in, even though I had no idea what to create, let alone how to create anything. It always held very high value to me for reasons I can't even hope to imagine. I was just born that way. And I think when Bitcoin came along and when Satoshi came along and solving that particular computer science problem, which had been hitherto thought to be potentially impossible.
Yes.
I mean, just the fact that it might actually be possible and that it might work, that for the academic people and the computer geeks involved at that time, I mean, that would have held, I mean, it was literally like a Holy Grail, right?
Yes.
To be part of the group or the person or whatever that proved that some theoretical system actually worked. And then, before they knew it, the thing had branched out into society as a monetary value thing, and then the real game was on, because now there's lots and lots of incentive for lots and lots of people to really put the system to the test and try to break it. And then it gets really, really exciting. So even at that point, even though it had value, how many of the original people would have really given much of a damn about the monetary value that it may or may not have had? But just
so
being on
even people putting energy into Bitcoin to like tear it down, like makes it more resistant in the end.
That made it more. Yeah, and that's what made it so darn fascinating, though. That's when it really
Yes.
got exciting, because you'd be on the, well, I wasn't involved in the mining, but I still, after the white paper in 2011, I was kind of metaphorically kind of on the edge of my seat, biting my fingernails. Is this thing going to survive? And then it's not, of course, you go quickly outside of the technology and into the political spectrum and all of that nonsense and all the various different ways, the social attacks and everything else. And, right or wrong, Bitcoin stands strong today. The game theory worked out, even though it went in directions that a lot of people didn't want it to. And, there were different visions that may or may not have even been feasible. Ultimately, it emerged to be, at the very least, some kind of store of value, and valued a great deal by a lot of people, and it has stood the test of time, despite it no longer actually resembling quite what the original vision was, I don't think, without getting into the details of that. But that in itself has, to me, more value than all of the money you ever could have made out of it.
Would you say that Bitcoin is the most valuable game theory that's ever been applied to economics?
I don't think it's had enough time to establish that. I'm sure there's.
What's an example of like another form of game theory, if we're thinking outside of crypto?
War between countries.
Okay.
So
that's considered not an economic thing when you're using force to like control people?
Well, it's not just using force to control people, though. It is a game, as horrible as that sounds, a game or an art.
Okay.
It's a setup on each side. It's about extracting value, right, and moving value from one place to another, and strategies and so forth. I mean, ideally, you don't go to war unless you think you can win, and you don't try to defend yourself and
Yeah, I can read here like
an enormous amount of money
on Investopedia. It says a game is any set of circumstances that has a result dependent on the actions of two or more decision makers, aka players. Players have a strategic decision maker, or are a strategic decision maker within the context of the game. The strategy comes down to a complete plan of action a player will take given the set of circumstances that might arise within the game. Then you've got three more things. You've got the payoff, which is the payout a player receives from arriving at a particular outcome. The payout can be in any quantifiable form, from dollars to utility. The information set, the information available at any given point in the game. The term information set is most usually applied when the game has a sequential component. And finally, the equilibrium is the point in a game where both players have made their decisions and an outcome is reached. So a lot of people in Hex are making decisions, that are being continuous in time, right? Or that aren't reversible. So there's that immutability factor that comes out of Bitcoin and
the fact that you can do anything unreversible. The fact that you can do anything unreversible at all in digital land is only a thing because the Byzantine general's problem was solved.
Trust.
Or trustlessness, the ability to have confidence in the validity of information despite existing, both yourself and the information itself existing in an adversarial, completely trustless, untrustable scenario, But just quickly getting back to, your question about was Bitcoin, the most monetarily biggest thing or whatever that had come out of game theory. I just want to nail that one home and go, not yet, no. It hasn't even met one war's bounty yet, unfortunately. But hopefully it's I mean, it gives a way to focus on the game in non-violent ways, hopefully to keep some of the people out of the war mindset and in the digital world, I suppose, I guess, hopefully, maybe. But, how long before there's a war to blow up a bunch of mining resources in some country or another, I don't even want to think about it. We digress. You were saying?
Yeah, it's too bad we don't have any like proof of stake type thing that would be a little bit better than Bitcoin. I mean, it's too bad Bitcoin's the best thing we have these days, huh? Au contraire.
Arguably, yeah. In fact, let's argue that.
Okay.
I'll take your side, you take my side, and we'll see who wins.
Okay. Well, I heard about some cyber hornets that, they're so cool with Robert Breedlove and Michael Saylor that they prevent the decay, or they represent all of the people who have a stake in Bitcoin. And now those people are using their power to try to indoctrinate more people into this belief system and into a certain way of thinking, to the point where, we're seeing crypto tribalism, right? Because people not only really Bitcoin means a lot of things to a lot of people. For a lot of people, it's sold through a number of narratives. One, that you're being decentralized, that you're becoming independent from the dollar, from, corporate interests, from, from war and surveillance and all kinds of things are promised that aren't true today in 2021.
This idea that humans have, that they can be set free or somehow reliably separated and kept safe from the rest of humanity.
That's really profound.
But it's pervasive throughout all time, and it's wrong. I mean, it's just it's as errant as all. I mean, and even if you could, good luck with the bacteria.
Because that's I mean, sun and Wells syndrome kind of encapsulates that idea that that you're still going to feel things, when you reach some level of wealth that you weren't imagining or that you didn't have contact with before. I mean, but go on.
Now, I'm not sure which one of us would win in a who can tangent the most epically in the least amount of time battle. I think I could give you a run for your money.
I mean, I thought that's what we were doing here.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, it wasn't an insult. It was just...
Yeah.
I realized that we were both so good at taking random tangents that maybe we should make it a competition. That's really what I was trying to say.
Sure. Yeah, so if you close the loop at the end, then...
now there's the trick.
And no taking notes.
Omega 369 helps a lot with that, especially if you're not taking notes.
This section of the voice chat has been brought to you by Omega 369.
And other fishy things.
Upgrade your prefrontal cortex from an iPhone 1 to an iPhone 20.
Yes. Drink your cod liver oil. So
basically, yeah, Bitcoin is creating value through these like cyber hornets, right? That are, at the end of the day, part of the social network that's not only enforcing, right, the rules, right? So Richard always says
creating value.
Richard always says, right, that blockchains are socially enforced.
Just because the rules upon which a blockchain operates is effectively socially enforced, as is everything else on this planet that humans care about. I would draw the line somewhere before that these narratives themselves, quote unquote, create value. I don't think. Yeah, I mean that's an interesting. I mean now you're getting into the difference between sort of Keynesian and Austrian economics as to whether value can be created or whether it's solely an emergent thing, right? They might think they're creating value, but I don't think.
Before we get into that, I think like the thought that I was just wanting to kind of finish, and one that I wanted to bring to this discussion, was this idea that really we can expand off of Richard's aha moment and insight, right? That Bitcoin is actually a proof of stake system, right? That doesn't even understand itself, because the power bill that the miners are paying, that is their, that's their stake. People who are investing time into understanding what the difference is between money and Bitcoin, and comparing and contrasting those things, even at the attentional level, right, are our economy kind of runs on in reality runs on advertising, and having this competition for attention. And so when somebody does go to the trouble of learning what Bitcoin is, then they're less likely, I think, or really they have less time, right, to invest necessarily learning about other things that aren't kind of enforced by that social group that's teaching that. And so you have, I guess what I'm saying is, you have, it kind of goes along with the network effect of things, that when you have a group of people who has staked their time and their money, even if it's an inferior form of staking, right, where you're not going to get your time back, but you could associate with, more complex ideas. But in terms of being able to sell your Bitcoin at any point, is, that's kind of an inferior form of staking, or staking with less properties than with Hex. And so, but when you get people who have bought in already to an idea, then they become the people who go out and tell better stories about why this is the next form of money. And so it's kind of, people are rewarded with the price appreciation. So what Hex is doing is taking it, to me, like all the components of Bitcoin's game theory, is taking it to the next level.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that. Let's just rewind a little bit. So there's a couple of things. They're like, okay, so proof of work versus proof of stake. So I have a few theories about this. Firstly, if Bitcoin was initially created with the proof of stake model, I don't believe it would have worked. And the main reason I don't believe it would have worked is because it wouldn't have had that bootstrapping thing that I was talking about before, where one incentive sort of gave birth to an even bigger incentive, where the positive feedback loop of the creating value. And now that you've created value by by doing the mining thing to keep the network itself alive, and then you then add to that as an emergent, practically unpredictable thing. I don't think anyone could have predicted that. I wouldn't think any more than about 10% of the players at the time would have ever really thought that in their lifetime or in the foreseeable future that Bitcoin was going to turn into a monetary thing, and certainly not what it is today. But that proof of work system, which has other reasons for existing as well. Just this one point alone, it bootstrapped the environment into to have the second layer of now wanting to protect that value from real world adversary stuff. Not just, did we write the code wrong, or is this algorithm crackable, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So if you hadn't had that bootstrapping phase, and very importantly the time asymmetry with the proof of work algorithm, it's difficult for me to see how a proof of stake system as the first version of the thing could have actually succeeded, which is fascinating, because now it's very evident that proof of stake does work for all kinds of reasons. But I think Bitcoin and proof of work and everything kind of had to come first to create the culture and the environment, and to set up the game, the board, if you like.
Yes.
In order to allow the other technologies to expand upon it. So it's not fair, if that's true, it's not fair to say that proof of stake is better than proof of work. It's like the child, or an emergent thing that came out of a successful proof of work system. I also wouldn't want to bet that if you took away all of the proof of work systems from the network and had only proof of stake left, I just intuitively get the feeling that that could degrade quite rapidly because of the additional instability and multiple attack vectors and things. You know, there's just not enough diversity in the way the super system works. So you know, it's a fascinating topic, and the obvious argument from all of that is, well, if it can't survive on its own, then why have it at all? Why don't we just stick with proof of work? Well, of course, there's lots and lots of counter arguments for that. And at the end of the day, if it works and it's more efficient one way or another, we should run with it and worry about the problems when and if they actually occur. But we only get to do that because Bitcoin's already standing strong as the first with the network effect that's laid the ground. It's kind of built the handrails on the path up the mountain, right? And it gives other systems like the various different types of proof of stake, delegated proof of stake, and so forth. It gives us the just enough latitude to be able to have these experiments and run them in a form that, you know, that makes sense to enough people to actually carry value. And so far, it's worked out. But it's not a binary thing to me. It's just not a binary thing. It's not one is better than the other. I believe proof of stake is much, much better than proof of work for many reasons. But I don't believe it could exist without proof of work. Definitely not from a bootstrapping getting started point of view, and arguably maybe not even going forward. You're probably going to have to need the proof of work systems just because of the different ways that different entities of different sizes, monetary, you know, wealth and all that, they have different value systems and different, you know, attack vectors and the cost of attack versus the potential reward and all that kind of thing. Without diversity at that level, things become too focused, and it becomes too easy for someone that would be a bad player in the game to focus in on, or even get together and focus in on the one system that exists. You know, having all this diversity and different stuff, to a large degree, to my mind, actually helps the whole thing be more secure, like the whole crypto space in general, not any one particular coin.
Let's say that the world became much more abundant because of technology, and then the price of things would go down. Or we could just say the price is anything. But do you think in a more abundant world, do you think crypto is more relevant or less relevant, and why?
I don't believe in the more abundant world synopsis. I believe that there will be more abundance in the world, but I also believe that there will always be humans who are just genetically wired to need to have more of that abundance than other humans, and vice versa, perhaps.
But humans trade, like, you know, things of variable scarcity, right? Like, and of, you know, variable demand.
Well, abundance becomes very relative depending on where you're living, where you were born, and what the circumstances are. Whether a volcano went off just on the neighboring island or not. You know, you can go from abundant and to we've still got all this abundance, but it's, well, yeah, you can go from abundance where we had everything we could ever dream of, and we've still got it, but now we're getting ash rain down on top of it. So does that abundance actually count anymore, kind of a thing, you know? It's yeah. I mean, I certainly see a positive, you know, more abundant world. I mean, it's being created right in front of our eyes right now, but I think the challenge the human race has, and has always had, is to try to somehow maintain enough of a balance that those who have don't become so just insidiously hated by those who don't collectively. So
it's a popularity contest?
Well, you know, I mean, if the technology exists, then the poor and the rich can both have it. The poor can have it by stealing it if they can't afford to get it in other ways. Technology can fall into the wrong hands through, you know, violence, all kinds of different things. And at some point, if the vast majority of the masses collectively, culturally hates the minority that has all the cool stuff, as the amount of technology and the destructive power of the technology that we create as a species increases in its destructive power, it seems to me that if we allow that situation where the difference between those who have and don't is so extreme, that the end game just becomes annihilation for all, poor and wealthy.
I I don't necessarily see that,
No,
because
neither do I. I'm not saying it's
yeah.
necessary. I'm saying if we allow the dipole to become so
Well,
one-sided,
but we're
one-weighted.
not talking about allowing things. We're talking about like how things emerge as properties
Right.
of systems of humans, right?
Well, there's
Like,
there's different types of allowing, though, isn't there? There's if you're a person in power, say the president of a country or something, or rather, then if someone says to you, will you allow this or that, it seems to have a pretty clear context. But on the other hand, if you get a group of scientists together in, I don't know, Geneva or something, or rather, to talk about global warming or something like that, and you say to the scientists, how do we disallow this, or how do we create a system where that we create an allowance for solving this problem or whatever,
yeah.
you're still putting ideas into the world and coming up with things in that to allow or disallow via intention, but in a very different way. It's not just an order given from the top. It's popularizing certain ideas and all that kind of thing. So when I say allow, I mean as a species.
Yeah, I think well, and just kind of associating off that, I think that force isn't the only thing, right, that determines a policy, or you know uh, money moving, uh, economic energy and that sort of thing,
And I
right?
think it's
And so,
always force. I think it's always force. It's just a matter of how focused or not,
well,
and how powerful it
but I'm
is. A
also
greater
thinking,
force spread over a greater area may or may not have the same effect as a smaller force focused in just the right place.
so human behavior can be changed, right, based on having the right incentives in place, or the right positive conditioning. And
Oh,
so,
sure. But who gets to
in
create the incentives and decide what they should be, right? I mean, at the end of the day,
well,
it's
what
just
about the
ideas.
natural ones, right? Like,
Well, the natural ones are that the bacteria should have won.
who
And in a
says that they
sense that,
haven't?
well, I was just about to say, and ultimately they basically have. I mean, our own mitochondria, right? I mean, so yeah, and that's the thing, that these I mean, the human body and all of the other animals in creation are all emergent and surely unpredictable from the starting point. And yet here we are, So I don't know. So yeah, it's kind of an oxymoron, I guess, to talk about, will the species allow this or allow that.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
I use that term in a
but
kind of
that's
a
but that's
retrospective
kind
kind
of,
of thing. Did we allow it
yeah,
collectively?
yeah, but that, so that is kind of like what game theory is saying in terms of like probabilistic, and you know acting in their own best interest, right? I know that in some of the neuroscience work that I've done, we kind of made the assumption theoretically, for the purposes of reaching other conclusions, that people act in an adaptive way. So even if you look at people who are smoking tobacco cigarettes, which I've written extensively on, and studied for many years, why so many people smoke if it's agreed upon that it's so bad for you. And um, that kind of the assumption that, yeah, there is some benefit to smoking, although it might not, it might just be a short term and not a long term benefit, right? And it can be a mixed bag, where tobacco smoke damages lung tissue, right? But it also, um, for some people, helps with depression and ADHD and anxiety, and all these other things, right? And so, um, there's so there's, I think, a lot to unpack there, but the basic idea is still kind of, looking at what are the incentives, what are the outcomes, like what are the parameters, and to be able to say that people are acting generally in an adaptive way. How would you reconcile that with Bitcoin? So let's take the example of the miners. Like, what would it take for a miner to ruin Bitcoin, let's just say, like, in the very, very early days, or in a more simplified model than we've got in the wild right now? Like would they have had to just burn electricity and lie or something? Like,
Yeah, I do. It's kind of it's one of those questions that the validity of the question itself is questionable. But basically, again, it's a socially enforced network, right? So if one miner did everything they possibly could, and maybe they succeeded to take over the chain and maintain the longest chain, then all of the other academics that weren't in it for the money at the time would have just said, well, that failed. And they may or may not have come up with another idea and tried again.
Or would they have just worked that person out and continued on their delusion that it works?
Well,
by math.
The reason it's an invalid question is because that didn't happen, and the reason it didn't happen, historically speaking, is because there was always enough diversity in the mining to outnumber any one or minority group of players to allow it to happen. You can rest assured people tried, even long before there was any monetary reward in it. The idea that this problem had even been solved was abhorrent and ridiculous. So we're going to prove it, and the proving failed. The network stood long before there was any monetary value, right? I mean, even Satoshi, him, them, herself, I can imagine had two computers attacking each other and trying to break the system long before there was any dream of any monetary actual value actually working. Because that's the whole point of it, is to stand up in that very thing. So, if any one or any number of miners could have broken the system, then the system just simply wouldn't exist. It would have failed, and everyone would have given up and moved on. So it's kind of a weird question to ask, if you see what I mean. It's like, what would it have taken for one amoeba to screw up the entire line of evolution such that we ended up not existing? Interesting question. Don't know. It didn't happen, and the reason it didn't happen is because it couldn't happen. And how do we know it couldn't happen? Because we're here. Therefore, obviously, statistically, the balance of probabilities, it just wasn't something that ever could happen. And that ultimately, that's how you know whether the system you created worked or not. And turns out Bitcoin worked. Yay.
So it was immutable early on when it was weak because what? Because nobody heard of it, because everybody was too academic, or there weren't enough bad actors in the mix?
Immutability was never really a big part of the formula. It was censorship resistance, which obviously immutability is a big part of. But from a what is the problem we're trying to solve here point of view, it's that censorship resistance where all the focus was. How do we prevent other people coming in and changing the data? And it's a social game theory thing, because immutable is like, you can achieve that in lots of different ways. Like you can have a database on a computer or stuff carved into a rock in a vault 30,000 feet below the surface of the earth, encased in lead and blah, blah, blah.
Trust me, I've got all that.
But, if someone can still dig down 30,000 feet and find your lead encased box and change the words on your stone, then it's not censorship resistant, right? It's still pretty darn immutable because that takes a lot of energy. So, so censorship resistance is really what it's about, and immutability is just a property of censorship resistance, I think.
So
it carries forward into time, of course. Immutability invokes the time. as part of
I've kind of argued with Richard on this point, or I wouldn't say argued. I guess like he couldn't tell if I was joking or not, but
no one ever can.
It was the idea of like, is Hex actually a form of Bitcoin? And because obviously it was called Bitcoin Hex to attract a group of people who would use it, right?
Oh, I'm just going to cut you off right there. It absolutely is. It absolutely is.
Yes.
It absolutely is, because what it is the game theory. It's an embodiment of the similar game theory with a few of the issues fixed, a few of the technical bugs taken away, and therefore
it's a UTXO fork in a way.
No, it's not literally that.
It's not?
No, how can it can't be literally that.
Because of the free claim.
That's like saying a Macintosh computer is literally a Windows computer because they both run Word.
No, because of the free claim.
Oh, because of the free claim.
Yeah, no, it literally is the UTXO fork of Bitcoin.
It
is.
So no, it's not. No, it's not. I see your point. But it's not.
No. That's not the part that I disagree with Richard on.
If it was a fork, it would have taken the entire UTXO set, and it did not. So you can't. It's not a fork.
No,
but I see what you're saying.
There's a special name for that. No. There's a special name for that. It's a Merkle tree. So it's like a trimmed UTXO set. Like.
Yeah, but then it's. Well, what do you call that? A sub fork or something? I mean, I'm a bit of a purist when it comes to these terms. A fork is a fork.
Yeah. No, there's a name for it. No, a fork is not a fork.
A blockchain fork is a blockchain fork, and you can do all these sub forks and roll ups and God knows what else. But I mean, semantics. Let's not argue about semantics. But I get back to your point. It kind of is.
So what I said early on in Hex, that I still stand by, is that, Hex took the smartest people from Bitcoin, right, and incentivized them to learn about Hex, which is a better game theory. So
it took the smartest people from Bitcoin. It didn't do any such thing that I'm aware of. Hex was a slap in the face to the smartest people in Bitcoin, saying, I dare you to even bother claiming any of this stuff amongst the peer pressure that you will face. UTXO, incidentally.
Or it was a filter to see who would.
No. That I agree with for sure.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if I might be way louder than you because my little speech bubbly thing here.
Got way louder.
Oh.
Are we yelling?
Just turn this down a bit. No, I don't think so. But I just noticed that the grey box around my icon thing is expanding greatly more than yours. I don't know what.
Yeah, mine's going more too. Yeah.
I hear you fine though. Anyway, so yeah, I mean on that score, I agree with what I think you were going to say, which is basic. I mean that whole thing allowing Bitcoiners to claim Hex was to me the words that describe that to me that summarize it basically are only the worthy shall pass.
Yeah. It's right? Bootstrapping, right? Like
no, but it's not even because I don't think it was needed. I mean, initially it was needed because the whole the AA lobby and all that didn't exist, right? But once that idea came along, letting Bitcoiners free claim was just not needed. Why not Ethereum? Why not Cardano? Why not anywhere? It didn't have to be Bitcoin. Could have been anything.
Yeah, no, it did because you want that audience.
Why? Only the audience that's disgruntled and thinks that there might be a better way. That's not what I would call the core Bitcoin audience. It was genius in that sense, but you
didn't want the core Bitcoin audience. You wanted.
Then why market it towards them?
To peel off just the right type of people.
Well, sure. Right? And they could have gone to an exchange and sold their Bitcoin for some, say, Ethereum or Doge, and free claimed their Doge. I mean,
what?
Why put the Bitcoin brand on it? It wasn't required from a technical point of view.
That's what people were only interested. I know because I'm one of them and came from a community of people who was just like, oh, there's more to learn in Bitcoin. Oh, there's a bunch of articles that keep saying the same thing.
So you're the problem. I thought you
And
were part of the
then
solution all this
it
time.
was
Turns out
like,
you're part of the problem.
oh, you can do a signature and you can free claim stuff. And so
Yeah.
like, what was it? Bitcoin Rhodium, which is like XRC now, was an example of something that you could free claim, you could buy, and Mimblewimble coin, like,
Yeah.
Hex, all these things there were people in the space like looking for free claims, wanting to learn what differentiated them, and so putting Bitcoin in the brand name, I think, really it was selecting the right audience.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I don't know. Then I'm not part of. I mean, I knew that I could free claim Bitcoin, and all I could think about at the time was why in God's name would I want to have anything to do with centralized exchanges and Bitcoin when I can just go the Ethereum route and the AA.
Why
right?
would you deal with a centralized exchange?
For Bitcoin, do it without one. I dare you.
What do you mean?
How do you get? If you already had Bitcoin in your account, yeah, fine. But I didn't. But I could. I could have put some in there, right, to go that route. But
yeah,
I couldn't.
So you were in the other target audience that was being combined, like the people.
Yeah, well,
in Ethereum.
so the people that had Bitcoin balances worth bothering with, is that the target audience? The naysayers and the people dragging their feet and the old technology from so far ago I don't even know their names anymore.
It's people in Bitcoin who want to learn how to do something useful, right? Like, or
what are
who
they
are
at that?
wanting
But
to
seriously,
get paid.
I mean, I don't want to offend people here, but this was my point of view. My point of view was like, why is Richard targeting Bitcoiners when Ethereum's already been around for 4 years or 5 years or whatever it was? The technology's moved on so far beyond that. Why are we still trying to interest those people that can't be bothered keeping up? I mean, it doesn't do any harm, but I didn't understand it. I was like, why Bitcoin? They're not going to come across. And they didn't. What, like 2% or something or other did? You probably would have got 30% of Ethereum
in history. That's the biggest free claim in history. What do you mean? That's
doesn't mean
awesome.
It can't be bigger. If you let all Ethereum holders from the main chain, ETH holders, if they could free claim, I think it would have been quite a lot larger. There's a smaller total market cap available there, absolutely. But the culture and the mindset of the people in the space, a far greater number of them would have willingly done the ICO thing, basically, and said, hell yeah, I'll free claim, yeah, go for it. There wouldn't have been all this dissension.
But then
you would have got more money. A much greater percentage of the Ethereum space would have come across. And I think as things turned out, I mean, it's easy to say in hindsight, right? I was surprised how small the percentage of Bitcoin free claimers were. I expected there'd be more people doing it just for the hell of it.
It was the biggest one. Everybody was on centralized exchanges, which is why they couldn't sign. 2% is off the charts for a free claim. I was in one that was like 1.5% before that, and that was the biggest one today.
Well, the theoretical maximum for a free claim is 100%.
No, it's...
And so...
No, not if there's centralized exchanges. They're not going
to... Why wouldn't they free claim? Well, they were blocked from free claiming, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
All the multi-sig things and all that kind of whatnot. But which brings me full circle back around to the whole. I think that free claiming off of Bitcoin was more of a political statement and more of a, literally, and only the worthy shall pass. Only the people that can get their heads out of their asses and blah 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 get to have this for free. Everyone else has got to buy it.
Like Richard and Hex didn't necessarily need the biggest number of people to get into Hex in the beginning. In fact, we needed the opposite. We needed only, like, as you say, the worthy, or only the people who've been filtered down to like a certain situation.
We needed the largest number of the largest number of non-whales. We needed to avoid. We needed to avoid massive centralization out of the gate, economic centralization out of the gate. Well, and so, actually, we had to avoid uncontrolled massive economic centralization out of the gate.
And whereas but
we needed laser focused, controlled massive centralization of financial power. out of the gate
And
in
that's
order to
what
make Hex what it is today. We just didn't know
and
that
that's
at
what
the time. Richard
editing
did.
the UTXO fork did, right? It was forked out Whales.
Yeah, but it was a voluntary thing. It's like, do you want to be part of the fork or not? On top of that, right? Which is why there was only 2 point something %. You had to go and actually do the claim. You didn't just get forked over. Semantics again. But yeah, I'm not sure why it matters, but I'm pretty confident I'm right on the semantic part. UTXO, for anyone, it's just the unspent transaction outputs, which is basically the account, all the current account balances, all the unspent. So balances of Bitcoin that exist in the network.
So it's like a snapshot.
And addresses that have not been spent. Yeah, I mean, yeah, but yeah, it is. Okay. I was just going to try and get technical with you. But money
that's
that's
what
been
people
sent.
would know it as. That's what people would know it as.
A UTXO is money that has been sent to another address but not spent. And it actually matters because it hasn't actually arrived at the said address. When you send funds in Bitcoin to another address, it doesn't actually go to that other address. It just doesn't. But a person that holds the private keys for that address can spend it, if that makes sense. So you can't. Yeah, it's not
like
stored somewhere on the blockchain. It's just stored.
Yeah, it's like pointing to one of those like big boulders that they had, for money. It's like pointing at that and being like, okay, now somebody else owns that. Like,
well, another way to explain it is that you can send Bitcoin to an infinite number of addresses that you know almost for certainty that no one has private keys for, and it will never be able to be spent, but it's still a UTXO, unspent transaction output, right? That we call that burning today, when you burn your coins. But it's just a technical little thing that's interesting because with banks, when we send money from one bank account to another, we have the idea that the funds arrive in that bank account as a thing, but it's not actually the way it works in crypto. It's just fascinating little weirdo thing. Did you also know that in Bitcoin, and when you send a transaction, say you have $1,000 worth of Bitcoin, let's keep it in Bitcoin. Let's say you have 10 Bitcoin, and you want to send 1 Bitcoin to Matty. Turns out what actually happens is all 10 Bitcoin gets spent. Always. Anytime you ever send a transaction out of a Bitcoin account, it always spends the entire balance. And there are two things. There's where it's going to, which can be multiple places, but keeping it simple, where it's going to, what's called a change address. Change as in the thing only costs $2, I gave you 10, so you owe me $8 change. So the sender gets to specify the change address, which is where the change will come back. And if you take the amount that you sent to the person, add the change amount to that, the balance between that total and whatever the balance of the actual account. So if you started with 10 and you sent 1 to Matty, but you asked for only 8 Bitcoin back as change, the balance becomes the transaction fee, that 1 extra Bitcoin that wasn't part of the output, wasn't part of the change address. Whatever was left over is what the miner gets. That's how it works. You don't actually specify a transaction fee. The transaction fee is what's left over, interestingly, in Bitcoin.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. So, when you read the code and you first get into it, you say, wait a minute. So I've got 10 grand here and I want to send $1 to someone, but the network's going to send the whole 10 grand and I've just got to hope that the change comes back successfully. Yeah, bro, that's how it works.
Trust.
Yeah, but it doesn't actually come back. I mean, because it's just another UTXO. But anyway, whatever. It's just fascinating that there's levels of there are differences in how the whole system works that you would not expect, because it's just money after all, right? But it actually works in very different ways at lots of different levels. Not to mention the game theory, which is what's so cool.
So anyway, a snapshot is a UTXO like moment in time, and and then you can be required to like sign something to prove that you had it, or you could get it airdropped for free, right?
Yeah, so I think we should definitely all support Matty in standing strong with his beliefs and the meanings behind them. Oh, well,
You
you
just
go.
like
Go, Matty.
I'm
You go for
so
it.
so. I mean, like,
No, I mean,
I, like
philosophical. I get the
maybe
philosophical
no no
point.
no
I'm
no
just,
no
I'm
no
just being
no no
pedantic.
no. Here's what I'm saying. Like you might. I know you know everything. Like, and may or
No,
may
only
not be
I,
Satoshi.
I only
But
need
like
17 hours.
I'm
17
just
hours
telling
ahead of
you,
what you
like
know. That's
I'm
not
just
everything.
telling you, like, what I learned as somebody who was, doing a lot of this back in the day, and that's how I found Hex. So when I throw around a term, maybe I'm not even like remembering the term correctly, but there is some sort of like, there is a way to understand Hex as a UTXO set that Richard has agreed with me on.
Oh no,
I'm
no, no,
probably not
absolutely,
I'm probably not
absolutely,
speaking about
no,
it very
absolutely. No, I mean,
very correctly, but
I'm still very stuck on the literal meaning of the word fork. I'm still way back there.
so okay.
But
So
philosophically
let's
and from all practical
say
purposes, of course you're correct. Yeah, of course.
perfect.
Yeah, of course.
And so my thing though is see, if we really want to win hearts and minds, and we really, because like I don't want to leave everybody in Bitcoin behind, because they believe like cool things, right? That like people should be independent, and that
No
like
one,
all the money in the world shouldn't be
no
spent on
one,
war, and
no one ever left anyone behind in Bitcoin. We just were walking down the road, and for some reason, a bunch of them just stopped walking with us. I don't know what happened.
okay,
But
well
we're not
let's
leaving them behind. They can come join us anytime they want. And even better than that, because it's a digital world, they don't even have to spend the time or the energy to get from way back where they are to where we are. They can just be here because it's like World of Warcraft or something, right? When you've
I
got
don't
God
know
mode turned on and you can just
anything about
instantly be
any of
somewhere.
that, but what I do know is that it would be a pretty sweet narrative if we're just like, oh yeah, by the way, like Hex is Bitcoin, and so it turns out it fits all of your values that you already have, and all you have to do is upgrade.
Yeah, but they don't, do they, for the most part?
I think
mean,
the idea of an upgrade, I think that's a good narrative. Like, it's still Bitcoin. It's just we called it Hex for a little while because people didn't understand it, right?
this
Like,
all still sounds a lot like our tree's better than your tree. Come on, monkeys, come over here. Or you can't have it because it's ours, or some combination of the both.
people
I
are gonna
mean,
need a way to like get on the right side of history, and
but it's
so
so
maybe that's one
easy.
thing that could come out
It's
of here.
easy though. They just have to be in the right place at the right time with the right kind of mindset to make a decision that puts them on whatever side it is that we're saying is the right side, right?
I I
it's not a
would
big challenge. It's not something that takes a lot of work.
instead
It's
of
not something they're being gatekept for. It's not
instead of
something that
choosing instead of choosing which people are worthy, I would rather like help people be worthy, right? Like, people can
Now,
change even if they don't want to, right?
hang on. So I talked about the quote unquote fork for Hex, and I said, it's kind of like only the worthy shall pass.
Yes.
So let me clarify because I think there's some murkiness about what I meant by that.
I wasn't
Just
getting stuck on words. I was just saying like the bigger idea, right? That
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah. But
the people are going to need a way to come back to, or to give Hex a second chance, right? And so I'm
why?
just thinking creatively
Why?
of like how to communicate with
Why?
Bitcoiners.
Why? It's like I leave New Zealand and I move to the United States, and someone back at home saying, that country you were born in and lived in for 50 years in that, I'm trying to create a system, a path for you to, give your birth country in 50 years experience a second chance. Who the hell cares? I'm gone. I'm doing my own thing. Why do we need to, what is it with this thing that we have to go back and collect the flock that didn't make it across the river that day because the storm was blowing or whatever the heck? Why do we have to go get them? And now, I'm not saying this in a negative way. I'm not trying to say that I deserve it or any other thing. And I'm not saying that they should be prevented from coming and discovering Hex by any means. But why does it fall upon us to go and quote unquote rescue these people that, well, haven't asked for it, for one thing, and probably don't even need it for the other? I mean, the information is out there. if they want it, if they're not somewhere they want to be and they're looking to be in another place, we're not hard to find. I don't understand why we
You
should be
say
going back to
that.
try and collect them.
You say that, right? But what people need in order to change is like a good enough narrative, right?
No. What people need in order to change is a desire to change, is the idea that change is even a thing.
False. Categorically false. But that's what most people think. But I worked for 11,000 hours with people who did not want to change. And
okay, I'm talking ethically here. I'm talking ethically, not physically or biologically, just pure ethics. You shouldn't ethically try to change somebody who doesn't want to change.
Okay, so like you let people continue in the sick economic environment that they're living in because they're not ready. No,
wait a minute. Let them? I'm pretty sure a couple of Chinese people stubbed their toe around about now, somewhere over in China. Did I let that happen? Yeah, this is an interesting conversation. I'm not letting them do anything. What I'm doing is I'm putting the information out there freely for anybody to see that can. And I hope to reach as many people as I possibly can. And we all do, collectively. It's all there to see. This is not a grassroots organization anymore. This is a $170 billion coin. All right?
It's still grassroots.
No,
it is. No, it is grassroots.
Not really.
Pre-viral.
Yeah, but not really. It's number 3 or number 8, depending on how you count it.
53,000 people is not number 3
in the world.
It's not number 3 in the world.
53,000 people. It doesn't matter how many people are in it. It matters where the information is and how visible it is. Right? The information is available. It's out there. It's really out there. Can we make it more out there? Absolutely. Are we doing a disservice, though, to people because we haven't put enough information out there fast enough, quick enough, in enough places yet? No, I don't buy that. Not now. Maybe a year ago, but not now. I just don't buy that.
You're mad that people don't understand HEX.
I'm not mad. I'm mad that people that don't understand anything will throw insults and hate at people who have different understandings. And I'm not even really that mad about that. What makes me mad is that they don't even bother to research to figure out whether maybe they might be right or wrong before they open their mouths and start hating on people. Now, this is just a normal thing that happens all the time in human society, and everyone hates it, and younger people tend to do it more than older people, and older people, because they get punched in the head enough times or some other negative consequence, tend to sort of chill out and stop doing it. Tend to. It's normal, right? But I very much dislike when people stand strong on some belief that they have that is categorically, factually wrong. And even that doesn't bother me so much, but when they start to judge me as a good person or a bad person, or doing a right thing or a wrong thing, and they try to broadcast that idea to other people and colour their ideas about me, well, yeah, that makes me mad. The rest of it I can take or leave. In my younger years, I'd just as soon take the person's head off for even looking at me, because I was a bit of a loner and I didn't like company. But I don't know. I mean, the guiding light, the hand stretched out to say, "Hey, brother, if you need some help, let's see what we can do." I'm all for all of that. But I don't think we should bring the whole mission to a freaking halt, say, hang on a minute, we can't leave yet. There's a bunch of people left behind that never wanted to come, spat at us, hated us, doesn't want to come. But, maybe now that we're shining even brighter and we're even richer and we're even more right than we were before, maybe now they'll change their minds. No, it just makes no sense. It doesn't work. It doesn't work at any level. Imagine bacteria, 2 competing bacteria in a petri dish. If by some strange chance the one that was growing the bigger decided to halt the whole thing and turn around and just see if they can convert the other. I mean, this is nonsensical. It's nonsensical is the word. It's counterproductive. Is it a bad thing to go back and try to get the last few stragglers? I would say no. It's
Not the
certainly.
last few. It's how many people do you think are in Bitcoin? 5 million?
How many people do I think that are in Bitcoin? I'm going to rephrase your question so that it's a question that I would rather be asked, because that's how you beat the game, right? How many people do I think are in Bitcoin who are unhappy with where they are and
No,
would
no,
like
no,
to be
no,
in
no,
a
no.
better
My
place?
question was much more knowable, right?
What's it? How many people do I think are in Bitcoin?
Yeah,
I don't know.
a million, five
Some
million.
number larger than there used to be. Who cares? Let's say that there was a number. Carry on.
I was just trying to do some math, but
Okay, well let's say there's 10 million people in
okay,
Bitcoin. It's probably more like
yeah.
100 million, but let's just say there's
So,
10 million.
so it's not the few stragglers. It's not a small amount. It's multiples of how many people are in Hex.
Yeah, but there's stragglers are people that wanted to get to where you are, but sort of haven't kind of got the gumption up to sort of get there yet. That's a straggler. The other people are people that are steadfast in where they are, quite happy, don't want to move anywhere, and are frankly insulted that we would even suggest that they need to be somewhere else.
We're
And we're
talking
doing
about
them.
we're talking about human behavior, like, and how to change it, like, and so my point is that the narrative is part of the environment in which people are limited in when they can get into Hex because of the information that they've been able to hear. And I don't blame the victim for not being able to hear that there's a healthier money in town, because honestly, I'm not sure that that was ever broadcast in the right order.
But
Like
you're
Richard
presupposing
came
that they're a
along.
victim in the first place.
So
That's
Richard,
They're not
don't get
victims.
try
They're
to
less
not get stuck.
fortunates.
Try to not get stuck on like any like one word that I'm using, right?
I'm not.
Because I'm really trying to just speak more broadly, right? About
But
what
there's an
are the
intention. There's an intention and a desire and a will that you're trying to communicate, and I'm trying to zero in on what that is. I'm not
so
using
so
individual words
so
as an attack.
okay,
I'm using it as to try to find some kind of clarity as to what it is
yeah.
exactly that you're trying to,
So maybe you should ask me some questions.
um, okay, I can ask some questions. Well, I mean, the overarching question is, why is it important to you that the people who had the most opportunity out of all of the people on the planet, those being the people already involved in crypto, why is it so important that we try to bring them along into a new space when the vast majority of the population of the planet doesn't really even understand what crypto is, period, let alone Bitcoin or anything else? You know,
So for
why?
one, yeah, okay. I'll let you finish the question.
No, that's fine. I was going to make some analogy to some Bible prophecy, fable or something, but I'll skip it.
Yeah, maybe because their money is more transparent and movable than in the legacy financial system, which could shut down gates to some extent. Also because I think that they are much more ready than they know, because we're headed into a bear market where people are going to have every opportunity to learn. I think that people maybe were intentionally biased. We're talking about game theory. I think that part of the game theory of launching Hex was to intentionally bias people by putting Hex into the context when Richard went on the show with Tone Vase and two lawyers, the show that exposes scams, and he seemed kind of aloof from being so um, sleep deprived, and it spent many hours. This is the day that Hex was released. Spent many hours uh, in a defensive position against people that he knew were going to argue against him and were going to look very knowledgeable when they when they argued with him about that, and you probably saw that, right?
They came across with a tone of voice that was very knowledgeable, whilst the words they used were so full of crap I couldn't believe my bloody ears. But sure, and Richard was very tired, but he still crucified them, frankly. Anyway.
Yeah, every time I hear the word pedantic, I cringe a little bit.
Right.
And so you had to filter out the majority of people who had the same values in order to get that core of people who would be the select few that would be able to reach escape velocity and not murder the price continuously.
Yeah. In the beginning, but now's not the beginning. Now there's a light that everyone in crypto can see.
But you can't see it if you've been taught wrong, or if you're not even in touch with what crypto is, right? And so
you can see it. You can see it. You may have been misguided to have the belief that the light is coming to kill you and absorb everything that you hold dear. Nevertheless, it's there and you can see, and if you do your own research, you might find out something different. And expect no profit from the work of others, and that includes me going to rescue your sorry ass when the information was right there for you to see. No one came to me and sold me Hex.
No?
I didn't get that. Nope.
Richard didn't tell you anything?
Maybe Whales and I are unique, but we were both, if I understand his story correctly, we were both legit searching at the point of giving up for some version of what the original
Me too. Yeah, that's why I was looking for something to program mental health and the money other than Bitcoin, because I realized that Bitcoin wasn't
right. Yeah. So when I onboard people, they get to learn real fast a whole bunch of stuff that they didn't know at all, because they're no coiners and it's easier. And I'm kind of selling them something. When I encountered Richard, I saw that he was trying to sell something, but I wasn't being sold to. I was hearing an expert marketing sort of online sales hacker expert pitching a story and a bunch of ideas and a personality in a seemingly narcissistic kind of a way, which I now understand differently, but anyway, that's what it was like at the time.
Facts.
And I was like, okay, right? I was like, okay, so you're saying this, that, and everything else. I don't believe you. Why the hell would I? I especially don't believe you because of all this extra, I'm so great and blah, 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 blah. But I cannot judge the information you are disseminating unless I understand it. And frankly, you're the only person saying anything new or interesting in the space, so I'm going to torture myself and cringe every time you open your mouth and speak in ways that are foreign to me and which I have been culturally educated to run from. You know, successful people? Hell no, don't spend any time with them. They're evil. And through doing that, and only because I was searching for the truth and I was searching for something that could possibly be, and it's not like it was the only thing I was looking for or looking at the time, I actually got so exhausted through that process that I had to take a hiatus. And it just so happens that when I came back, Hex had launched 3 months prior. I missed the launch because I was so exhausted searching through and understanding and trying to find where it was all at. And when I finally figured it all out and I came back to see where things were at, it had already launched. So no, nobody came to me and tried to convince me of anything. And if Richard was trying to do that, and I don't think he was, I think he was just building community basically, sharing ideas. Those who understood would follow, those who didn't would not. And those who did not were idiots and the R word.
That's my point. Yeah. Well,
there's no way.
That's my point, is that he was trying to repel people.
Maybe, maybe not. But the point is that nobody did me the favor of selling Hex to me. And
Yes.
that makes it so much more valuable to me because it forced me to do the research to know for damn sure how freaking awesome it is. And I just don't think it has the same value to anyone that has it rammed down their throat and convinced and, oh, come on, give it one more try and
I'm
all the
not
rest of that.
I'm
If
not
they don't
talking
have
about
that
that
journey.
type of convincing. I'm talking about like people having an aha moment and saying, "Oh, wow, like, all the great things that I thought Bitcoin could do, like Hex actually does those," to the point where, "Oh, what's the origin story?" Oh, the origin story is that Hex is actually much more related to Bitcoin than I thought, because cryptos are socially enforced networks that create stakers. If people are invested in Bitcoin, they're easily going to change their minds if they think that they're already a part of something that they thought that they were a part of. It's like if you reveal to somebody that somebody's been lying to them, right? But then having a graceful way to kind of, pivot and save face, right? Like, all I'm saying is
Yeah, no, that all
what's
makes
the
a lot of sense.
story? What's
That
the
all makes, yeah,
story
the
that
narrative that they're hearing and
speaks
everything
to
else.
people, right? Like, and
Sure,
because
sure.
I look a lot at origin stories and narratives as like driving forces in people deciding what their beliefs and behaviors
And that is
are going to
true.
be.
I can't argue with that. I mean, I can. I can argue with anything, as you no doubt know, but I won't argue with that. But I would just say, I mean, Ethereum, Litecoin, Doge, Link, ADA. I can't even be bothered trying to remember all the rest of them. Some hundred and something plus full chain coins, over 10,000 tokens, CNBC, Fox News, God only knows how much other stuff. It's not like these Bitcoiners have been sitting there in a little thing and no one's ever told them that there's something else out there. What is one more story going to do for them if they haven't been able to?
Because
If they're not searching, how can they find? Do you mean to hit them over the head with a metaphorical baseball bat and make them see the light?
so maybe you're
There's a
not
time
pleased that
there's a
I'm talking about it kind of not in a application sense yet, but just in kind of like a, conceptual
no,
phase
no,
of
yeah, no,
like,
no. I'm only talking about it,
like,
and if my tone of voice sort of starts to sound like I'm getting real serious about it, I'm really not. I'm really just I'm discussing it at a
yeah,
philosophical
yeah, we're
point,
just
right?
bullshitting here.
It's yeah, exactly right. It's just bullshit. I tend to get a bit passionate and start to use the tones of voices as if I were really doing a thing. Because when my mind goes into deep research mode, it tends to role play like that. So I apologize if that was misleading. But it's purely philosophical. But although my opinion would be still that I think that the energy would be better placed elsewhere and let the network effect gather up those people in due course. Am I sad that they got left behind, that they got duped, in my opinion? And yours, it sounds like? Sure. Do I wish it didn't happen? Sure. Do I wish I could go back and rescue them in some way that made sense and was effective and efficient? Absolutely. Does human behavior really work like that? No. It can if you can apply, and certainly with your skill set, if you can apply focused, attentive, energy in a direction of a certain person or small group of people, you can achieve many things in terms of bringing truth and light to them. But in general, most people don't really sort of have that ability or the training, and secondly, I mean, ultimately, if the people don't, if they're happy where they are because they just don't know any better, it's not like we're saying they can't join us. And well, there is a
We
danger of
are,
that, of course. The tribalism thing
yeah, yeah, yeah,
can
yeah.
create that atmosphere
Yes,
for sure, for sure.
yes.
But the young people in our midst are always going to be that way. That's just how young people are. You know, a tribalist. It's part of growing up, getting out of that, surpassing and transcending the tribalist kind of a thing. And I don't begrudge that. I mean, it's obviously important. Otherwise, evolution wouldn't have made it so. It's unfortunate. There's always going to be the older people with the wiser, or sometimes younger. Just, the people who, through whatever means, whether it be just age and experience or good luck or genetics or whatever, have somehow come up with more wisdom than the people around them. They're always going to exist and they're always going to have a message. Whether it's heard or not, because it's a matter of statistics, isn't it? And the environments that everybody else is coming at it from. I don't want to see tribalism become a big thing. And Hex, I don't want to become like toxic Bitcoiners, maximalists. And there's a risk that if we even joke along those lines, that we'll actually bring it to pass, especially because new people and younger people with less experience won't realize that we were joking, and they'll think that that's just what you do around here. And so I think as the older, more mature people, we kind of need to maybe rein that in a little bit. But on the other hand, who the hell am I to say what anybody else does with, their newfound love and the thing that's rescued them from financial adversity and everything else. And ultimately, whatever will be, will be. I don't personally see there being a huge amount of personal benefit to me, all the people I know, and focusing hard on trying to prevent something that hasn't actually happened yet. But I certainly want to keep an ear to the ground, and I certainly want to be cognizant of, that kind of toxicity showing up and trying to encourage it to be tempered. But I don't for one moment think that I can set rules and tell people what they can and can't do. I can only state my opinion and whether I think their actions are supportive of the majority, the way I see it, or not. And that's the most I can do. And I fail at that routinely if I'm tired, in a bad mood, or I've just heard the same piece of bullshit 20 times over, and then I hear somebody else say it, even though they were already quoting someone else, and they didn't believe it themselves, and I shoot them down. Hey, I'm only human, and not a great one.
Well, here's what we've done. If we want to get kind of meta or something right now, is we've whittled this audience down to like people who are just joining and people who are still listening. Even if we've been talking in tangents the whole time, they cared so much, right, about the topic, maybe the title of the stream, something, right, that they're still here. And so all of you people with huge attention spans and way too much fans of physics or something, right? Like
I'm still here. What does that say?
There's a reason that we filtered out all the people who didn't care as much as you, because we have a special job for you to be thinking about what it means for human beings to be staked in a system that has so many positive feedback loops, so many pumpamentals, right? And that has, because this is what I've been thinking about for a long time, and I think I have trouble communicating it. And maybe as a community we'll get better at communicating what I think is one of the core principles of Hex is kind of the socially enforced network effects, the social psychology of people being able to explain it to each other, of being able to pay your future self, of but really specifically that one emergent property is that a certain amount of people in Hex, right, as it continues to bring them more and more wealth, right, is actually aligning resources and incentives to go out and, like, to improve Hex, whether we're looking at that as improving Hex is taking what Hex is, a finished product, and being able to communicate that better to different groups of people, right? I guess being able to market it better, right? Or really, it's more of educating and kind of, in my opinion, like really figuring out, like, well, where are people getting stuck in understanding this new form of money, right? Because a lot of people, if we go to the example of the internet being created, some people thought the internet was email because that was the first app that was created. I think a lot of people in Bitcoin, they think Bitcoin is going to ultimately be the end all be all because it was the first that was created. And then we have the example of the wheel, right, that I wrote up in an article from almost a year ago now, talking about how, right, like, we don't always appreciate inventions right when they happen. So I'll just read like a really quick like portion of this. So it's the title of the article is saying that 3G crypto hex fixes mental health and programmable money cures the curse of paper money. Inventions can catch you by surprise. The wheel was first invented for pottery 300 years before its best use case, transportation. That's right. Imagine waiting 3 centuries for the invention of 2G wheels, the kind of wheels that don't just make bowls. Then suddenly, wheels are carrying humans to places they never thought possible.
Yeah,
Inventions take time to fully emerge.
but
At first, few knew the internet went beyond email, its first app. People thought email was the internet, just an electronic letter making process. It's not obvious how inferior centralized physical money is, or even Bitcoin, until you grasp the vastly superior invention of hex, which I would call the third generation of crypto. Just like the wheel was mistaken for a bowl maker and the internet for an e-letter, first generation crypto Bitcoin is still mistaken as the best decentralized digital money. 3G crypto hex goes beyond currency to offer a new function of money, paying yourself, which will lead to abundant mental health. The part that I left out is that you will learn about that, right? You will practice sending money to your future self, and then you will have to wait, and you might end up being way more productive than anybody could have guessed, and that this might cause like a structure, I think, to humanity. And that article goes more into this idea that like people will pay their future selves, that people will instead of just behavior locking with a savings plan to time lock money, right? People will expand that to other behaviors that so you could pay yourself to quit smoking tobacco cigarettes, or to start eating healthier, or to take more steps in your day. And
if you want to.
Sure.
Yeah. Hey, can I talk about the wheel and why the 300 years took the 300 years? Wasn't the wheel's fault.
Yeah.
Wasn't the wheel's fault.
Yeah.
It wasn't. I don't believe it was. Now,
Break it down.
you do your own research, and maybe I'll even do some research on this someday, but I believe that the reason the wheel wasn't used for transport was because it was impractical and unsafe up until the point the brake got invented. The ability to slow the darn thing down. Hey, you could use that thing in for carriages, so instead of dragging them across the ground, they'd roll really easily and effortlessly. Well, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard. There'd be carriages running off cliffs left, right. You fool. Wheels for transport, duh. Just saying.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's I thought you were gonna...
Maybe even the steering wheel. I mean, when this thing can just roll down a hill on its own without being dragged by 100 slaves and 2 elephants. Maybe maybe we need to invent the steering wheel too, and the brake, before the wheel makes any sense. But why would you invent a steering wheel or a brake if you don't have wheels? Tough questions. I didn't mean to completely blindside you there, Matty. You were talking good stuff.
Oh.
And I'd really like to have a chat someday with the person who wrote that article you're reading. Sounds like a really interesting person.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
You're welcome. I've read that article.
Yes.
It's a good article. Well, yeah. Well, I'm pleased that we didn't just end up going, well, it depends.
So it's so what I'm predicting, I guess, specifically is that more people, especially in the audience listening now, will maybe spend some time thinking and maybe talking with others really about what you think some of the game theory is behind Hex that we're still starting to understand, that maybe we're starting to see. I remember back when, it was Hex was paying less than 10% maximum inflation, right? Or maximum interest. And so it was super unclear really what was going to happen because it hadn't happened yet. And now that I feel that we're sitting on the edge of becoming viral, it makes me really curious to think about like, okay, what's going to happen next, right? And that's my guess, is that people are going to keep going further and further down the rabbit hole, and people are going to keep catching up faster and faster, and then smarter and smarter people are going to keep contributing to the marketing, to the education, to a lot of the understanding of the game theory, and maybe even helping, like I said, different groups of people get into Hex who otherwise they wouldn't have had the right narrative, or they would have, right, like had some sort of mental block or behavioral block. And to really, like, I guess to get down to the ultimate game theory maybe of humanity, that like the cooperation and and abundance for all, right? That people being motivated to not like lay around all day depressed, right? But not oppressed, right? And so people being able to access their intrinsic motivation, that's something that people could program into money themselves, right? And so
Yeah,
being
if you
able to
know how,
program motivation, right?
it's taken
or
me
like,
some time to figure that one out, let me tell you. I never thought
well,
that having more money come out of nowhere, I figured it would give me a bunch of options,
correct. I'm
but,
surprised too.
yeah,
Yeah.
but having to figure out what to do with those options and when to do it and when not to do it, and whether I should even think about it now or just wait 5 years and come back and look at it again, it is a major headache until you figure it out.
It's
Right.
horribly confusing.
It
Yeah.
is. Because it's confusing because you would never have in your wildest dreams ever thought that it would be any kind of a problem. It'd
Yes.
just be Yahoo, and yet it's anything but. And you basically you have to experience it to believe it. Obviously, 'cause
Yes.
I'm not that dumb, and I never would have believed it. I never did. Now I
Yes.
do.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the emergence, is like, Richard is out there saying that he didn't predict it would be that he would hear so many good things about people's mental health, right? When they were
Yeah.
time locking their money, and he was just really kind of designing around some technical aspects that he wanted to improve. And then, all of a sudden kind of the right questions were getting asked, and the team was coming up with, answers to all the different problems in crypto, at least, to some extent. And so
Well,
it's really
certainly one thing.
interesting to me.
Yeah. Well, one thing my experience with Hex to date has done for me is even though some of those things have been very challenging, which still sounds ridiculous, having all this wealth is challenging, but it's just getting your head around it sometimes, because you hold the option, anyway, whatever, what I said before. But it's put me in a situation where there's actually a kind of a clarity on what exactly it is I'm confused about and what needs resolving, which wasn't there before, because there just wasn't enough at stake to make it a big priority in my life before. So even though it's been challenging, having something to focus some clarity onto where the issues lie, is at least something. But and there's always a safety valve. When it gets too hard, you just go 100% staked, and then
I've never done that.
Relax. Even if it's just for a month, it buys you 30 days reprieve. Oh, it's so good.
Really?
It's so good. It's so hard to do because you so want to decide the ultimate strategy with your 5% liquid or whatever, right? I do this and I
It's
do that.
just
And I'll set it
like-
up this way and that way, and you want to do it just right, and then it gets too much, and one day you go, you know what, and you just stake it, and it feels horrible right up until the point it confirms, and then you just go, maybe in a month I'll have another look at this.
Yeah, I mean,
It's crazy.
I don't
sounds so
stress
stupid.
as much about the optimal play because I actually I view my you know, I view my position in Hex, which I am all in at this point, more or less, is you know, if I sell Hex, right? So for example, I sold Hex when there was the Uniswap airdrop, right? And well, okay, so actually I did not sell Hex at that point. The way that it really happened is, but it felt like that, right? Because I had the opportunity cost that I took instead of buying Hex, which I knew would go up significantly. I decided to sacrifice to buy some celebrity shoutouts that became the starting point for my channel, which then led me to get positive feedback from the community and become known as like nobody had seen my face, but it was just, oh, this guy did some videos promoting Hex, and that you know, I mixed up the celebrity appearances with Richard explaining what is Hex, like, you know, different aspects of it that might appeal to different people, and so I knew, right, that I was sacrificing at that point. And those Uniswap airdrops right now are worth over $300,000 each, right? And they started as like 1,200 or 15 or wherever you got in at. So, and I don't feel bad. I don't feel like I didn't play the best strategy, because that was an intentional plan, right, for me to sacrifice. And maybe I could say like I wasn't as certain, right? But
so here's the context though. Here's why it stresses me out.
Okay.
It's quite simple. I'm out of dry powder. I'm completely out. There's no more dry powder, i.e. there's no more fiat, there's nothing more I can sell, there's nothing. What I have in Hex today is what I have in Hex, period. And I don't see any, you know, other than the random airdrop here and there, I'm not getting any more Hex. There's just no way I can. I don't have any income, I don't have the ability to work full time. I have health issues, I have a whole bunch of things going on. I'm 50 years old. So I'm in that phase, for better or for worse, in all practical terms at the very least, where I'm now having to protect the wealth that Hex has given me. So the optimal strategy is more about trying not to screw up too much.
Do you have to protect something that's growing so fast?
From myself? Are you kidding me?
Protect from yourself, you're saying?
Whoa, yeah.
Because
there's like, making mistakes, but there's also just being dumb. And I can be pretty dumb sometimes with depression and whatnot, you know. So, yeah. The optimal play, frankly, is to be staked, all of it, as far as Hex goes. But if you're also wanting to do things in the real world with Hex, then you have to be suboptimal. And that's when the challenge starts, because you know you're being suboptimal. If maximum gains is optimal.
Judge it. I mean, but it's, for me, my outcome measure is not maximum gains. My outcome measure is like, right, the balance between.
Oh, me too.
Kind of like, you know, being proud of like, so I'm proud that I sacrificed, right? Like, I'm not talking about the pulse thing. I'm talking about like, I'm glad that I spent money marketing Hex when I knew I could have spent that money on Hex.
Yeah, I mean, all of the funds that I've taken from Hex in the past and spent, I'm glad I did, and I don't regret.
Okay.
There is some funds that I could have had back when it really mattered, and that we had the opportunity and we made the decision not to go ahead and sell some stuff. And had we done so, I don't even want to talk about it. You know, that's
you would be
that's
2
a regret.
months in the future instead of half a day.
No. Well, no, I suppose technically that's right, but that's not how it looks on the chart in the vertical axis, my friend.
Well,
that's a 1,000x more than we currently have.
Look at the random line chart.
Whatever. Yeah, I mean, but we'd be a step. trust me, I'm already very, very happy, and it could have been 1,000 times what it is now. I'm sorry, I lie. That's in New Zealand dollars computed data. It's about 600 and something, easily. And it's not about being ahead in, yeah, okay, 2 months further ahead in time, but with
Yes.
8 times the capital in as well. So, you know.
But
Anyway,
so
let's
you
not
don't
get
think
hung
it's
up
gonna
on
go
the.
up enough for you? Like you
I
have
didn't
to
say
be
that.
like
I didn't
2
say
months
that.
faster.
I didn't.
But
No,
to
but
be
it's not
happy,
about. No, 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 no. It's not about being 2 months faster. It's not. It's not. Back then, $100 got me what cost me $100,000 to get now. So it's not just 2 months. I had the 100,000 back
I'm
then.
talking about what the price of Hex will be in 2 months from now
It's not going to be a
compared
thousand
to
X. How can it be 1,000X? Well, I mean it could, but I
you're
mean it's
down
not going to.
1,000. So you missed out on 1,000x.
I'm down 1,000X. And I because we had those funds, they could have been available, and we could have deployed them, and we made the decision
But
not
they
to.
couldn't because
Was
otherwise
hang on? No,
you would
wait,
have.
wait, wait. Well,
You're blaming yourself for something
I'm
you
not.
didn't know.
What do you mean something I didn't know?
So you knew that you were giving up that.
I knew. I had a very, very high degree of confidence that if we had reassigned those funds to Hex, that it would have paid off in spades. And ultimately, the only reason we didn't is because I was sick and tired of making plan after plan after plan after plan, only to have some better plan come around and make me go, oh, well, scrap all that, do something different. And I thought, for once in my life, and we both agreed, Burr and I, we're going to stick to the stupid plan. And I don't even know what that plan was anymore, and I don't care, and it's irrelevant. And that sucks. Am I blaming myself for it? No, I didn't do anything wrong. Do I have regrets? Not really. I'm pretty happy with what we've got. But in terms of Hex I've sold, I have no regrets at all, because it was difficult decisions to make at the time, but it's done. It's history. I can't change it. That's cool. This other stuff niggles me, though. But it niggles me not because we didn't get the extra 1,000X or whatever. It's more the deeper issue that, here I am stressing out trying to make plans, when even having plans, it seems, is my very nemesis.
You would have gone through the same thing 2 months ago. As you.
No, I wouldn't
So,
have,
like,
because that dry powder was no longer available. It's gone. It's been.
So what I'm saying is, if you had gone all in by selling things and reached the amount of money that you're going to reach 2 months from now, if you had reached that by today, you would have gone through the same, like probably some of the same regret, would you say? Or stress?
So the reason that we would have been 1,000X further up, it's not a question of I didn't put the money in until later. I didn't put the money in at all. So if we'd put this money in, it would have been almost 1,000 times, about 660 times, I think, times more capital deployed into Hex than what we had deployed. Right? Therefore, the end result was, if the price never changed and it got to wherever it got, it's just automatically 660. And then you add on other things to that, and it brings it up to, well, now it must be well over 1,000. But you see, that event in itself isn't the issue. What I'm really talking about is what stresses me. Because going forward, it's kind of opposite way around now. It's like selling versus not selling, deploying versus not deploying, wants versus needs versus this plan, that plan, the other plan. We're knowing that every time I've ever made a plan for anything ever in my life, whether they come to fruition or they don't, they always, always, always get superseded by a better plan, usually before the first one ever had a chance to complete. Always. And here I am trying to plan something I can't even predict. And so just stake. It's easier. If only it were that easy. No, I'm talking about this because I'm sure there's got to be other people out there. I have this
Exactly.
conversation. Yeah, I have this conversation with all of my friends. Don't get it. They go, "What is wrong with the way your brain works?" They really don't get it. They don't see what my issue is. They're just like, well, "You're just making life more complicated than it needs to be." But from my perspective, this is reality as it exists, as God presents it to me, so to speak. So I figured there's probably other people out there have the same problem, if it is a problem.
Yeah, I mean, and for those who haven't gotten to this stage yet, it's what we're talking about is part of sudden wealth syndrome, and part of understanding, right? Like
Well, it's
our
just the
own
weight and the gravity that is now
behaviors
bestowed
and
upon these decisions, right? Because this is life-changing funds. This isn't like, oh well, we decided to have KFC. Probably should have had pizza because I didn't know the KFC was going to have some poison whatever in it, and I threw up for 3 days straight. And blah blah. It's not. This is life change. This is generationally life changing. Speaking of which, I'm now questioning whether my choice not to have children was the right one, because maybe they won't be poor broke, you know. it goes so far, and you can let it go in your mind as deep as you want. It'll never stop. It's an endless abyss, or ascent to heaven, depending on how you look at it. But having options is it's I don't need anything more than I have to be happy. That is also true throughout this whole process. I'm perfectly comfortable at 50, been through this multiple schools of hard knocks, come through it relatively unscathed, all things considered. Very happy with how things have turned out. And then this comes along, and I mean, on the one hand, some of the wildest dreams I had when I was young that made a lot of sense when I was young and that don't make a lot of sense now because I'm just older and have different value systems now, they come a knocking. It's like, well, maybe now you could actually do that thing that made a lot of sense back then that you can't be bothered doing now because you're an old fogey. Maybe you need to revitalize your life a bit. Or maybe you don't. Oh, great. Another decision to make. Just stake for 30 days. Come back to it later. It's stressful, Matty. It's really stressful. It just is. I mean, it's always been a fight. It's always been a struggle. I could have been much more wealthy than I am. Much, much more wealthy than I am, even with the illness thing. If I even gave a damn about that in the first 30 years of my life. I didn't. Frankly, didn't. Every cent I got, I spent, and I was happy for it, and I didn't have a care in the world.
So then you couldn't have been wealthier because you didn't have the skills.
Oh, I had the skills. I had the means and I had the skills. I even studied it. I could have done it. I chose not to. And had I not got sick, I would not have regretted that. But, that's just the luck of the draw, isn't it? Whatever. But anyway, my point is that in spite of that, in spite of making decisions that led to things turning out worse than they might have been, blah, 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 because unpredictable, this, that, and everything else, the fact is that when it's all said and done, I'm actually quite happy and quite comfortable. I'm safe. I have an awesome, loving relationship. I've had others before as well over the many, many, many years. I have great friends. I have everything I need, all the food I could ever want. Too much, evidently. That's why we don't have the cameras on. It's the true reason. My belly keeps blocking my view. And then so having been so psychologically sort of adapted and sort of chilled and sort of sort of starting to become the early stages of the wise old man who doesn't pine for pretty girls and fancy cars and things anymore. All of a sudden, through very little actual physical effort, I wouldn't say through little intent. There was certainly a lot of intent that led me to find and understand HEX and its value, but it wasn't a lot of physical effort. Here I am in this situation now where actually I could go back and readdress a lot of that stuff. And here's the funny thing. It's weird. So I can have the jet ski and the yacht and this, that, or the other car and the fancy house and all the cool stuff, right? All the good clothes, the custom tailored suits and things that I once had, all that stuff from back in the day. Now, I said I could have been a lot more wealthy. I mean, I had plenty of money. I just spent it all on all kinds of fancy stuff. I had, I had the yacht, I had the car, I had the suits, I had the, the gold, this, that, and everything else. A relatively expensive watch, not a Rolex. Never really liked them, frankly. And all of that stuff. And I was only working 3 days a week, actually, in the last year or so. Yeah, I was doing all right. I had a buttload of debt, which wasn't great, but it was all manageable, assuming I had, income, and I had nothing that was going to last more than 5 years. It was a rule I had. That's why I didn't have a mortgage. Refused to have any debt lasting more than 5 years. Because I never knew, I had no experience of being able to hold a plan together for more than 3 years, let alone 5, so I capped it at 5, saved myself from myself. It all seemed to be pretty smart, all things considered. And then you get sick and you go, well, just as well I spend all that money on the life insurance, the health insurance. And then the health insurance says, well, it seems there's no real label for this whatever illness you have, so sorry. Can I have my principal back? No.
So part of...
But I'm happy. That's the point. I'm actually happy. But now I've got all this money again, and I'm having to think about all this stuff again, or not. I'm so ready to just go, you know what, screw it. Just stake everything 15 years and let whatever be. It's crazy. I've gone from, it'd be really nice to have this or that or whatever, still, to like, it's too hard, screw it. It's just, what the hell? It's backwards and upside down.
I mean, that's right. That's us fighting with like the persistence over time that having a stake is causing us, right?
Like, I think that what I really wanted was to have the wanting. And now that
like the struggle.
And now that I can have whatever I want, then that they say stay hungry, right? Yeah. I'm not hungry anymore because I can have not anything I want, but anything that was on my list of realistic things that I might buy someday. I can have any of that now.
Everything except the stake.
Yeah, because I burned it.
That's right.
Yeah, but then this other funny thing. So you get your head straight and finally sort of back on the sort of straight and narrow and thinking sensibly again, and you think, okay, we don't need the jet ski and the boat and the 3 girlfriends and all that stuff because, we're older and wiser now. All we want now is a house on the hill with about 8 bedrooms, 2 jacuzzis. It's just like, and you go,
you
what?
Better not
10
get
million?
That.
But it's like, what?
Then
$10 million? That's not going to buy me my house on the hill. That's not enough. Stupid Hicks, what's wrong with you?
Yeah. Why don't you work faster?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because we're arguing about onboarding Bitcoiners instead of just coming up with fun stories to
tell. And then after you get laughing about that, and you go, okay, now seriously though, maybe a $1 million house. Let's not go crazy. Just one jacuzzi and maybe 4 bedrooms is enough, and then you go, but hang on a minute, house like that around here is going to cost a couple mil, maybe the type that I'm talking about. That's real top end. So that's no big deal. But you're like, well, hang on a minute. But you hang on a minute. But if I use Hex to buy that $2 million house, now without getting into some of Gary's clever ideas, funding Jim, if you just straight up cashed out the Hex and bought the house and that was that, well, that's a hell of an expensive house the way the price is going, right? So a year later, I would have essentially. Yeah, I know you were going to say that. A year later, I would have essentially paid like what? Like $1 billion for that house, and it still has a market value of only 2.5 or something million?
No, somebody else who came later only because you were able to sell. Like, if you didn't sell, then there wouldn't have been, right? Like, there wouldn't have been a transaction.
The only way to hold on to a highly appreciating asset and maintain your wealth is to not spend any of it ever. period.
You would have delayed, right? You would have delayed your sell, which just means that you would have hurt the price more later on. So like, it's not so in the whole system.
No, I wouldn't have.
Right? Like,
What? I would have been a smaller percentage of just the total effect on the price would have been more or less the same. I would have thought. And I would have, and you know, and
if
it
you
was
got
if
a
it was to
$1 billion
buy,
house instead of $1 million house, the effect on the price would be the same.
if the difference between the two houses was time and market changes, yeah, I'd say so. In fact, less, because HEX would appreciate much faster than the house, so I have an even smaller effect on the HEX. Yeah. I mean, my point is that when you cash out HEX, the opportunity cost, that is, the money you're not making in staking interest and price appreciation, it's a thing. It's a big deal. The difference between buying $1 million house now and that same $1 million house for $1.2 million a year later, in terms of your total net worth, is astronomically greater if you wait that 1 year. You pay an extra $200K for the house, but you doubled your HEX maybe 3 times. You know.
But that's not like, opportunity cost isn't real.
Yes.
It's not realized. It's not even paper gains. It's like imaginary paper gains.
That's like saying life isn't real, but that's like saying life isn't real because you can shoot yourself in the head anytime you want.
You're saying that so you're saying you have the choice, but like, then you can't go back and rewrite history and say like, oh, the choice could have been a different way. Like
but I'm not talking about the past
raindrop
here.
thinks
I'm talking
he's the storm,
about the future.
Yeah.
Right? Opportunity cost related to the past is realized. You don't have it. You have exactly not that amount of money that you could have had. It's 100% realized.
But you couldn't have had it because that wasn't.
Of course you could.
If you think a butterfly flapping its wing can change stuff, then I would say like making decisions doesn't allow there to be the same outcome in both situations. Like, right? Did you follow me there?
I did not. No.
Lorenzo effect.
Yeah, I understand the butterfly flapping its wings part. I didn't get how you were relating it to my other nonsense.
So if everybody holds, like if everybody has the same opportunity, you're saying, so like if everybody has the opportunity to hold and sell higher, then who's ever buying? You know, like
when did other people come into this? I'm talking about me.
Game theory is defined as like between more than one person.
Yeah, but I'm only talking about myself, a single player within the grand game.
Prices are based on more than one person, right?
Yeah.
So the way I look at it is, if I sell HEX for something, I know that I'm taking a hit, but I'm doing that because that allows somebody else to get in at that price. Like, so it's doing people a favor.
Yeah, when I sell small amounts of HEX, like, and small seems to get redefined every day as a bigger and bigger number, but anyway, in dollar terms. When I sell small amounts of HEX, it's not an issue. It's I mean, it's like probably not the wisest thing because it's just some useless doodad that's not an asset. It's just a luxury toy or whatever. So I probably shouldn't do it. Blah blah blah. But whatever, it's only a small amount of money. And yeah, sure, in a couple of years it probably would have cost me 5 times as much. All the things I've just been saying.
Yes.
But when it's a larger chunk of the 5% of your portfolio that you keep liquid, and it just feels like more, then it starts to matter, and you go, okay, well, what's the difference really philosophically? Well, philosophically, really not much, but it does raise the question, what percentage of the 5% of the whatever should I allow myself to spend at any given time in order to not have these feelings? And there is no quantity for that. I mean, throw a dart at a dartboard, wake up the next morning and go, nah, I don't like that number. Throw the dart again. I mean, there's no resolution. I mean, you could, Apparently,
But there is
some
regulation.
people are able to make decisions on this score apparently, and just say, well, that's the rule, and stick to it, and then they're happy. But I second, third, fourth, and infinite guess every decision I've ever made.
Okay.
Because I'm not necessarily confident that the decision I made was based on the purest of truth with the most sound mind at the time. Right.
You're programming your hex like based on your understanding at any given time. You're programming your financial energy, like whether to not sell something or whether to sell something. Like that's a program that you're running in your life, right?
Yeah. Did you know that
And
my
so,
left leg also goes by the name Yin,
how can you question that?
and my right leg also goes by the name Yang?
Yeah, like so.
And I walk in
questioning
circles constantly, which is
saying,
probably
like,
why they draw that the way they do in a whirlpool.
Yeah, it's a dialectic, right? Which is helpful actually to understand acceptance and change, right? Because you want to change your strategy with hex, and you want to accept it, and those are two opposites that don't go together.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think
like,
it's a dimensional
in this form
thing.
of therapy, like dialectical behavior therapy, like which does draw from, right, the yin and the yang.
It's more a case of differentiation or integration, right? Where I'm trying to figure out the answer to the. I'm expressing the question with too few. What do you call it? What do you call it when you add another thing? You go from a formula involving a squared, and you increase it, you integrate it to get a squared and a cubed. No, like the difference between acceleration versus velocity formulas. When you integrate a formula to go up one level, whatever. What are they not? I want to say factoids. When you add another factoid. What a moron. I can't think of the word. Anyway, whatever. Probably trying to ask the question at the wrong sort of complexity level, I suppose. Like, too complex or not complex enough. I don't know. I mean, all I'm really talking about, the whole context here, just to reel it all kind of in, is just why this stuff is stressful to me, or can be stressful to me when I engage with it, to be more specific.
And that's an important question to answer, because you're somebody who truly understands hex. And if that's like part of our roadmap for like educating people so they really know about hex, like we need to know what the positives and negatives are and how to like kind of refine that experience, in my opinion. So for example, my question to you would be like,
there's no one right answer for anyone,
what,
though, right?
So are you,
it's kind of self-discovery.
Would more certainty help you? Would less choices help you? Like what?
I don't need more certainty. Pretty good on that score. Less choices.
Certainty over your own behavior?
Oh no, I don't have any certainty about the future or anything like that, but I have certainty in the systems and how they work, and sufficient certainty in the way markets work in general. Hard fought and won certainty. Many years.
So like, for example,
probably should have read a book, but well.
Not speaking directly on your problems, because you can speak on those better, but if we just said like, if we took the issue of being able to sell too much all at once or something like that, how could multi-sig or like incorporating some other type of contract or programming, just theoretically, how could, right? Because if we're just,
well, we don't need that. We just stake, right? We just 5 stake, done, fixed.
No, but that's not fixed,
isn't it?
Right? Because then you have,
well, it's kicking the can down the road, but
of the maximum amount of time to be out of the game.
Well, what's wrong with that? If I quadricycle stake, there's only one of two outcomes that can happen realistically the way I would execute that. Well, actually, there's three. One of them is an emergency end stake at any time. If Hex goes, parabolically ridiculous. But that aside, one of either two things are going to happen. Either one, the stake is going to end. I'm going to take the interest probably because it's all I'll need for just about anything I want 15 years from now. Are you kidding me? And do whatever I want with it, and probably restake most of even the interest because blah blah blah. Or I'll be dead, or in some way incapacitated such that it's a moot point, or everything around me will have crumbled to such a point that it's irrelevant anyway. I mean, those are really the only conceivable outcomes. So, whereas if I don't stake this particular 5% of the portfolio, and I keep trying to figure out how to deploy it, what to do with it, how to leverage it to get things done or get things wanted in the physical, non-digital world, well, it's kind of hard. You raised this idea of reaching escape velocity, which I took to mean basically that there's just so much value there that it just doesn't really matter anymore because you can't spend it faster than it's coming in, kind of a deal.
Yeah.
Which, you know, it may come to that, the way things are looking for some period of time anyway. But that, you know, it's kind of a cop-out, sort of from the philosophical, like trying to figure out what the best thing to do is. I think stress, too much stress is bad, but I think applying one's mind to trying to figure out the best way to do something is a healthy exercise, actually, overall.
Yes.
It certainly builds character. So, you know, it's yin and yang again, isn't it? So, and keeping that in balance it's a bit like having a balanced diet. If you try to do it on every individual plate and make sure every meal is balanced, you're going to have a hard time. But, you know, if you get your veggies on one day and your meat on another day and overall it's balanced, you probably do all right. And I guess that's what I'm trying to do with all this. I allow it to stress me out.
Yeah.
Like eating chocolate for a couple of days. And then I stake for a week and go, oh, thank goodness. Sometimes I don't stake. And then a week goes by and then it's like withdrawal. And I've got to stake just to catch some reprieve. It's insane. It's all Hex's fault. It used to be that 5% of the portfolio was never really here nor there.
So.
But now it is. Maybe
so
I should reduce it to 1%.
So you're a brilliant programmer who is facing a problem with programmable money because it's not suiting you, or it's not interacting with your mood in a way that's tolerable. It's causing you pain, right?
I'm allowing it to cause me pain by trying to work out the best thing I can do with it. But yeah, I mean, I'm tired. I'm old. I'm tired. I mean, I guess that's part of it, you know. Like I'm done trying to build better things for the world. I wish I had the energy. I just don't, even for myself. This is kind of it. I have arrived. Well, until Pulse Chain, and then I get it doubled again, and then I will have arrived twice, which is kind of cool. Arrival in stereo. I like the sound of that. Yeah, it's all about protecting it now. Because I have a history of blowing every cent I ever had for perfectly valid reasons that made a lot of sense at the time, and for the most part I don't regret it. They resulted in some really cool non-monetary related.
So you're making a transition
milestones.
from really an economic environment that
I'm transitioning from
that was the best play, was to spend money quickly because prices go up more than savings.
Yeah, and it propelled non-monetary aspects of my life in directions that ultimately turned out to be far more valuable than any sum of money. So, and that was all done on intuition, of course. Just no amount of planning would have pulled that off, but yeah. Or I just got lucky, I don't know. Yeah, but I mean, it's like when the ability to just get off your ass and go work to feed yourself and put a roof over your head, when that no longer exists, and you have all kinds of support networks and everything, but ultimately that would mean relying on other people, which feels really yuck. Then you tend to protect what you've got and be more concerned about screwing it up and squandering it
Yeah.
and making dumb mistakes going forward, right?
Here's what I would recommend, and this is just spitballing here, but I really think that this is a matter of like, you or I or somebody who's like struggling, right, with sun wealth and with like the I would say like the excessive levels of complexity that go along with understanding like a new invention, right? It's like um sometimes I feel like I'm just an ape, just like banging a wheel around trying to figure out how to
Well,
make the brakes. Or
that's when it's easy, right? Like if Hex was just another ICO or some pump and dump thing, because I've done pretty well on some of those in the past as well, then it's easy come, easy go, But Hex isn't that. Hex is a long-term sustainable super asset, and that changes all the rules and the way you think about it.
Yeah, and
apparently.
so what I've kind of thought about even before I discovered Hex and just realized programmable money would exist and trying to see where that would take people, I really think you or I or somebody should be like almost piloting or trying to figure out how to pay ourselves for certain behaviors and see how to make that work, how to bootstrap that part of the game theory, because I think that people are going to run into the same problems we're running into, and much worse probably, because they aren't going to have the same exact factors in their environment that we have, in terms of being around healthy people and
I'm not sure I've ever seen that. I definitely haven't personally. I've heard stories of people claiming that it's happened, but I've never seen any evidence of a person making their own plan, sticking to their own plan, and having those decisions change their behavior. And
can I tell you a little bit more about how I envision?
Well, I'll just finish this one sentence, and then by all means, I do see a lot of people have a great deal of success with that kind of thing, where somebody else really works with them to help make the plan externally.
External structure and accountability.
And provides accountability and structure. Yeah, right.
So with programmable money, we can get the same effect because it is the external source of our past self that is dictating what the rules of this sub game are. And so, if, for example, the proof of concept was, I could pay myself 1 hex for every step I take in the day. And that's a rule that I create that then can be programmed either super aggressively, like there could be a secondary rule, like if I don't meet the number of steps, then the money gets locked for a week or a month or whatever, right?
I know it's just an example, but I have to say it. If you tried to do that specific thing with me, I would probably end up hopping up and down on a single foot, spinning in circles all day long, trying to figure out what the optimal number of steps was.
Sure. Or
Sorry, carry on.
Or attach it to your dog and totally cheat, right? Like but and I've thought about this extensively, right? Like, to me, it comes back to nudge, and it's like if you have to do so much effort to cheat the system, so it doesn't actually have to have a perfect Oracle system or anything.
Well, there wouldn't be any cheating. There'd just be this need to optimize.
So yeah, so you're just right back at the beginning. If you cheat yourself out of a behavior change that you've tried to pay yourself to do,
but here's the thing. If I can decide that I need to create a system to change a behavior, then why don't I just change the damn behavior?
Well,
instead of
So
going through all that nonsense. I mean, I get that sometimes you've got to, create patterns for muscle memory, sort of metaphorically speaking, and all the rest of that. But
well,
do you need reward for that?
because it's for the same reason. It's for the same reason that once you have money, you can't pay yourself to be motivated to do something. Whereas if you don't have the money, then
You can be
somebody
motivated
else
to
can
get the
pay
money.
you to be motivated to do work. So I'm
Sure.
not talking about everybody, but just in general, like
Sure.
humans are motivated by external sources of money, which always seems strange to me looking at it from this programmable money aspect to say that like, you know, so during the HEX conference, like I got out a $100 bill, and I wrote on top of it, I was like, don't spend me or something, right? And it's like that doesn't do anything
No.
because it's dumb money. But with smart money, right? With programmable money, I can write that, don't spend this for a year, and it will literally happen to some extent, right? With HEX. So being able to pay yourself to change some behavior, I think becomes a really powerful idea because that's already how we interact with money. And one of the basic functions of money is to motivate people to produce or to
Yeah, that all makes sense. I get the vibe.
okay.
I'm a little hung up on the details of being your own oracle and all that.
Oh, I didn't necessarily say you would be your own
No,
oracle.
no,
I said that,
I'm
yeah.
saying that because someone's got to be the oracle, right, and hold you to the thing, and it's probably going to have to be you. And that so I'm not trying to be critical of the thing here. I think the idea, I think it has a lot of merit, and I think we can do something with it.
Yes.
But I'm just applying my own, devil's advocate sort of like, oh, that wouldn't work for me because kind of a spin
Well,
on
that's
it,
what Richard said when I talked to him about it, but
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I think that it's
I think
such a weird idea to
if
pay yourself
if it were just a mechanical
that
thing that we set up, yeah. But if it was a fun game somehow,
yeah.
you
Well,
know,
I had
presuming.
to like tell people that they were paying their future self when they were time locking to like get people ready to hear about this like other form, right, of paying yourself, which is to change your behavior, which is included in the time locking. That's a savings plan. You're changing your savings plan behavior because you're time locking. And yeah, so paying yourself to save, that's like the most basic thing you could pay yourself for. And then paying yourself to do something else, yeah, let's come up with what a good example would be for that, right?
So let's say I have this issue where I always click the fingers on my left hand every time I see a red bus, and I've decided I need to change that behavior and stop clicking with frickin' fingers every time a red bus goes past. So how do we set this up?
Oh, I thought we were going to start with something easy.
Why would we do that? This is us.
Good point.
Okay. Well, no, you can come up with something easy. I don't mind. I was just trying to contribute positively for a change.
Sure. Right. So, but I'm asking, like what is something, right? So for example, the taking steps thing, like that is can be tracked by Fitbit. Like I looked into their API and like wrote a couple lines of code and everything, like to just do my little proof of concept and show that, I could make Python spit out like what number of steps I was at this moment by, calling the key approved number of step function right from the Fitbit server. So
Yeah,
something
you
like
can.
that, I
Yeah.
think is good enough if we're talking about behavioral activation for depression, which is a symptom of sun wealth syndrome. So, oh, you have so much sun wealth and like you have too many choices, right? And somebody's depressed, like,
That
well,
that's that's
get
not what it is,
moving.
you know. Yeah, that's it's
Otherwise,
not
your
really.
hex is left.
I don't think initially I thought that's what was causing the sort of stress which was causing the depressing part of it. But I think it was more about just disappointment in myself, because I had always said, and to myself and to others throughout my entire life, man, if I had that much money, I would XYZ, right? And then when it came, I was like, yeah, sort of can't be bothered. And so that triggered it.
I'm not following that.
Well, so I had always said that if I had this money or that money, whatever, I'd totally do this or do that or do something else, whether it would fix the world or buy a new toy or whatever it was. But then one day the money comes, and all those things that I was like, I would totally do this, I would totally do that, I'd set up this, set up that, rah, rah, rah. And now the money's here, and I'm like, nah, she can't be bothered doing any of that stuff. And I'm like, my brain's like going, but you said, and what? Why not? What's wrong with you? You fool? That's what made me sad. Was realizing that, this had finally happened, and all the things that I thought it should mean and all the things that it enables, which it still enables, I actually can't be bothered. I just don't care. So maybe that's which came first, the depression or the money, but I don't know. But in my case, that's what got me down, is that this thing that I always thought was going to be so great wasn't, for some silly reason, and I just felt like I was somehow letting the species down or something. Yeah, but anyway, maybe I'm just weird.
So it seems like you're giving a lot of different reasons, not just one reason that you would be down about.
Well, there's two. There's really only there's two. There's only two. There's two. There's not knowing what to do, that is the so-called optimal or whatever, and feeling that I should. But the reason I think that I feel that I should even try to come up with anything optimal is that I sort of feel like I should, because I always sort of said that I would, right? And I mean, talk to any person struggling on the street who's working 2 jobs, 3 jobs, whatever, if just had a little bit of extra cash, and say, well, if you had $1 million, and you could find a structure and help and advice and everything on how to invest that and everything to sort of get out of this rut, would you do it? And I'd be like, hell yes, I'd do it. But even if they screwed it up or whatever, and I was the same. I was like, hell yes, I'd do it. And now it's kind of there, and there's all these problems that still exist that I could still quote unquote fix.
Yeah.
And I don't want to. I just like, whatever.
Yeah.
And that to me just feels so wrong.
So if you really
and that's where the real depression comes from.
Then you would.
But I really can do it. I just literally don't want. Well, and of course the other thing is the longer and longer life goes on, the more and more things end up on that list, and to the point where no amount of money is ever going to do anything to get close to filling the list, right?
Of every idea you ever had to do, that you could somehow have, like.
Yeah, but that's easy, right? So you make a list, and then the list contains only those things that you can remember over a day or two. Okay, it's great. So that's narrowed it down a whole bunch, which is nice. We've only got like 100 things now. Sweet. So now we just need to prioritize them. Yep, know how to do that, can do that. Prioritize, rah, 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 blah, 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 blah. Let's, go over our values and everything, run it through a different thing, blah, blah, blah. Maybe meditate on it a little bit, rejuggle some things. Yep, awesome, got that. Okay, we're down to the last sort of 10. Let's put them in, that final priority order, come up with a plan. Let's execute the plan. Okay, we'll start with that. In order to get to B, we need to do A and A.1.2.3, and then that'll be done, and then we can tick that off, and then we can go to the next one. I know how to do all this stuff. I don't want to. Can't be asked. I have the means now, and I don't have the will. Before, I had the wish, and I didn't have the means. You don't
have the will. You don't have the energy.
That would be a cop. That would be a cop out.
But
why do you keep trying to give people the golden pass? I'm a bad person.
Because you're spending all your energy. Because you're spending all your energy worrying about things that.
Am I?
That really maybe aren't changing, can't change, or that it's not optimal, but like it's as optimal as it can be.
All I'm trying to say here is that it's not the not knowing what to do with the money, or feeling that you're not worthy, or maybe it is feeling that you're not worthy. But the reason I feel I'm not worthy is because I didn't even do and don't even want to do all the things that I kind of promised the universe I would, if only you'd give me the money. You know?
Okay, well, that's why the universe didn't give you the money until now, when you weren't going to do all those things that you weren't lined up to do.
Yeah, well, whatever. And and it's all good. And
what do you mean whatever? The
whatever.
Universe is all knowing until
whatever.
it gives you
Well,
what
exactly.
you wanted and decides that you're not.
No.
Shit that...
An all-knowing universe would never give somebody everything that the person thought they wanted. It would only give them what they actually needed.
We'll tell that to Hex, and then
I did. You know what it did? Damn price went up.
Yeah, because you didn't sell.
Sure I did.
You could fix the price thing, right? If you sell, and
I have to prevent my total net worth going over a certain figure because everyone has their price, and I'm afraid of what will happen if I reach my price.
I mean, there might be some truth to that, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's one thing that I do to regulate. Is like, if the number goes up too much, then yeah, I might sell a little bit. But now I'm getting to the point where it's like, maybe escape velocity, maybe.
But it's so hard, because then you start thinking I need to be altruistic, I need to be philanthropic. And then you think, oh, well, no, I've only got a couple of million. It's not like I can do what Bill Gates does. Okay, never mind. And then you rein yourself and you go, don't be ridiculous, don't think so grandiose. It's just bullshit, find something local that you can help some people out with, and rah, rah, rah. And then it still turns out that there's so much need in the world, you don't know what to do with it. And of course, you realize very quickly that money's not what's needed. It's other things. And just ditching the money onto other people.
Hex really is a way to motivate yourself by paying yourself to do
it. Well, it certainly motivates me to seriously think about these things. Whereas before I got a pass, but just going, I'm never going to have money anyway, so screw it, whatever. What can I do? Now at least I have a reason to actually give it some thought. What I could do with the money that I have.
Yeah, I mean, it's a wild ride to kind of come out of, the struggle, right?
Yeah.
And then to have to orient yourself and figure out what to do and like account for, the life that you've lived up until that point, right? And
I guess too, I think that the syndrome, if we sort of, because not everybody gets depressed just because they get sudden wealth. I mean, some people get ridiculously ecstatic and lose it all at the casino or something or other, because I think,
and then
I don't know what they think, and then maybe wind up depressed.
Levers.
But
reward structures.
But I think it's the shock of not being or feeling the person or the way that you were so sure you would have had this come to pass. It's just as mundane as that. The shock of waking up in the morning and going, well, still a multi-millionaire, wasn't last week, still am today. Well, whatever. And that's kind of shocking. It's like, what do you mean, whatever? Dude, you're a multi-millionaire. It's like, yeah, and? It's like, dude!
Yeah, I totally hear what you're saying. So some people describe this phenomenon, which I would like to know more about or find out if you've experienced like I have. So it's this idea that the things you own will end up owning you, ...
Yeah.
And then there's some hopefully there's some cure that I just
there is a cure.
The rest of the
there is a cure, because I've been through it. I've had it and I've cured it.
Hit me
twice. Okay, it's quite simple. Lose everything you own. The first time it helps if it gets done to you unexpectedly and there's nothing you could do about it.
You'll have to say how sarcastic, if at all, you're being now.
Not even remotely.
Okay.
If you want to escape the tragedy of the things you want collecting around you and becoming anchors that stop you from moving, metaphorically, physically, spiritually, whatever. The
So
only
let's
way...
back up and like define that a lot more before we talk about like how to deal with it. Because I think people, because I'm still trying to understand what that means and what that is and what that looks like.
Okay, so you use the phrase "things end up owning you."
So for example, like I am looking at buying a car, a used car. I won't say which one, but it kind of surprised me how much work I could put into it, right? Instead of it just like happening. Because for me, it was like the decision was, oh, I want to look into this particular type. And then it seems like suddenly super hard if I wanted to do it the right way, or if, it just seemed like one of those situations where I started talking to people who are experts about cars, and it's like, wow, they really seem, like, in some cases, I think things do end up owning people because it takes so much of your time, or it takes so much of your energy, or, and maybe it's something that you're enthusiastic about, or maybe it's something you're not. I'm not sure. I'm just...
Okay, well, I think there's sort of two different types of things. I mean, so what you're talking about there, I think, is more about the desire to have certain things and how much time that can take up when they may or may not be.
Maybe impatience, is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
as opposed to give that context, as opposed to things that you already have and not wanting them to let them go or letting them chain you down. Like, let's say you decide to get a fish tank, a big old fish tank with lots of tropical fish and everything in your house, and it's awesome. You've always wanted one. And so you get this thing and you just love it, and you spend a few weeks getting to know how to keep the water and everything all right and all that, and it's awesome. And your friends come around and they go, wow, that's the most amazing fish tank ever. And they go, oh yeah, I've got all these plans, da, 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 da. And then you want to go on holiday for a couple of weeks, and suddenly you realize, oh shite, who's going to feed the fish? Who even knows how to feed the fish without killing them and keeping them kicking? I mean, it's a crazy, it's a sort of a silly example, but it exemplifies. I mean, it really focuses in on how a thing can sort of own you. But there's lots of other little things too, like many things we have, when we start out young, and it's not like we have money growing out of our ears, and a lot of what we might in our older years consider trivial things, at the time we had to do some work to get those things, and some of those things, for whatever reason, seem important to us, and the idea of not having them one day, it can be a thing. And the more of those kinds of things you have, in some cases, like I guess the whatever the clinical word for someone who has a compulsive hoarder or something or other, I guess that's kind of the ultimate end of the spectrum from what I'm talking about. But usually when I hear the phrase, the things own you, I've always, maybe it doesn't, but I've always taken it to mean the things that you've already acquired. And it seems to be because of the amount of effort it took you to acquire those things, even though later on you might be able to get 10 of them for a penny. At the time, it was a big deal, right? Or it interested you a great deal then, but it doesn't now, but you're still somehow emotionally attached to them. And then so whenever you have to make a decision in life to go on some adventure, or well, not have to make, but you have the opportunity to make a decision to go on some adventure or change something, or maybe you meet some person and fall in love with them and they're just not into fish. Maybe their name's Wanda and they wanted to be a fish and they can't stand the sight of a tank because they got to be a human, not a fish. That's a Monty Python reference, never mind.
Happened to me several times.
Yeah. Well, she ended up getting eaten anyway, but whatever. And so you can't be with that person now because, hell no, man, that fish tank's important to me, right? So the fish tank owns you now. You're sort of not, it's that kind of thing. Whereas what you were describing was fascinating because it was kind of the flip side of the coin. It was the kind of the hunt for the things and the desire to have this, that, and everything else, it seemed you were talking about, and the energy that takes. and how, you know, the chasing after things tends to run your life as opposed to whatever the other thing is. I'd never thought about it from that, you know, that sort of flip side of the same coin before. But in the terms of the way that I was thinking of it, which is, you know, losing things that you do have, or not doing things because of what it might do to the things that you already have in your life. Yeah, there's nothing quite like just having it all just removed and going through that trauma at least once to just reset your whole brain about how all that works. And if you're so fortunate as to have it happen to you twice, as some of us have, you discover almost with glee that the second time it's like, oh well, it's happened before, I'll get over it, we'll get it back again, it'll be alright. Whereas the first time it was like, I want to jump off a cliff and die, this is the most horrible thing that ever happened to me in my whole life. And then eventually discovering that I actually did survive it, and actually it's okay, and actually rebuilding from scratch again is really cool, because I don't have all the useless junk that I regretted buying that I still had to keep around, and I got to use the newer, better stuff and only have the stuff that I wanted the way I wanted it, and hey, this is actually better. You know.
So there's,
But try to get someone to do that. Try to get someone to willingly just dump everything, give it away, whatever, in order to have the experience, in order to reprogram the brain to realize that it's actually okay. That's a big ask. It's a big ask. But man, can I recommend it. I think, you know, the minimalist movement surely are onto something along these lines, I guess. Rather than, and they've found that sort of balance where instead of giving everything away, you just minimalize.
The reason that I brought this up is because it sounds to me like at some points you maybe feel like Hex is creating some kind of obligation that might be similar to, like, especially your liquid bag, to, like, you know, being owned by the fish tank or something.
No, it's I might have mistaken it for obligation myself initially when I was first sort of dealing with it, but I think it's more it's kind of like opportunity loss. Like, there's opportunities abound, and if I don't, so in a sense it is kind of an obligation, I suppose, but not like a, you know, I need to do this because if I don't I'm a bad person kind of obligation. It's just like, well, what if there's something really cool I could do, because I can do, right, and I don't do it, I should at least think about it. Right? But then when I start thinking about that kind of thing, then that big list of all the things I've always wanted comes into my head again, and it's annoying, frankly, because some of them make absolutely no sense. I mean, what possible use do I have for a pink bunny suit with the big Mickey Mouse ears on it, out of, you know, mismatched? Now, I mean, that's just not something useful. At that fancy dress party way back when, with those people with all the money that were having that good time that night, it would have been so perfect. But why is that in my head now? I don't know. It's just silly. You know, we'll just get it anyway. It's an unresolved thing floating around in your brain. And then it's a spectrum too, of course. I think the way to feel good is to give the money to other causes, or use the money to subsist while you give your time to other people. That kind of feeds the soul, but it doesn't ultimately end up giving you personal sort of gratification and gratitude, I don't think, for most people. Kind of gets old. And that's the thing, there's so many different ways to skin this cat, you know. There's just, Maddie makes decisions and just goes, right, cool, decision, another one, they're everywhere, and goes for it, and it all seems to work out.
Yeah, and then I get decision fatigue and need somebody to help me, like, decide what size font I need to use for something, like.
Yeah, well, let's not forget that I was undiagnosed bipolar for 20 years, so I used to go through like 18 months at a time of having absolutely no difficulty in the world ever making any decision, and then another 18 months to 2 years not being able to make any decision. And apparently, the latter is closer to normal than the former. Apparently, if you're like Maddie, cheeky grin, tongue in cheek, you're manic, and that needs to be medicated out of you. You need to be normal and boring and have difficulty making decisions and wondering what's the point of living again. So
the point of life is to distract ourselves with healthy activities.
the point of life is that there is no point. I don't know, Matty. Don't ask me questions like that. I might push someone over the edge in the wrong direction that's listening.
Fair enough. Well,
I mean, not to be morbid, but it's, yeah, everyone has their own point of life, and it's self-discovery. And
sure.
the only advice I could offer to anyone who is depressed, who might be like I was, like as undiagnosed bipolar and unmedicated, in the depressive phases, is just to find something to hold on to, because it's a cycle. If it is a cycle for you, it'll never feel like it is. But and for me, that thing was pretty simple. It was like, well, at the end of the day, life's going to kill me whether I want it to or not. So I might as well just try to stick it out. Now, you'd better put some disclaimers on that before. But that's what worked for me, eventually. Yeah.
So we can practice thinking about like what are the behaviors that we want to pay ourselves for that are practical and measurable, and or right, we can look at other common things, right, that help with mental health and try to program those things in, because
the oracle issue. I'm hung up on the oracle issue.
Okay, well, I've solved that. So
okay.
The oracle issue is solved by nudge. If it takes more effort to work around, then you will do that so that your money isn't lost forever, unless you just solve that another way by, like, just time locking as the punishment. But otherwise, I mean, you can recruit somebody else to be your oracle, but then that gets messy with like the game theory of kind of having to deal with somebody else who may or may not be like, keep their part of the judgment.
Would it not possibly be better to cash out some and go to see a professional psychologist to use the hex for that rather than?
So that's like one. So like, but that gets into like regulatory stuff, right? So,
well, no, we wouldn't provide the service, of course.
As like a pay. So like, yeah. So that's one form of what we're already talking about, is like people would take money and then they would pay somebody else, right, to try to change their behavior. And in this case, your like past self is paying your future self to change some behavior.
Okay. So what kind of get back? I'm sorry to keep cutting you off here, but I'm obviously still struggling with understanding something about the whole. I mean, intuitively, the concept is cool, and it seems right, and it seems good and wholesome and everything. But I still keep coming back. So
go ahead.
Yeah, to change what behavior? Who decides? What are the options? And how do you know that that's a behavior that you even should change? And all that stuff. Like, so before the solution even comes into existence, how do we even define what the problem is?
Okay. Yeah. So we don't have to do it that way, but like, I
don't mean we. I mean the user.
Where I came, like, so maybe if I add this, it'll shed some light. So I worked in a laboratory where we paid people $1,000 to quit smoking tobacco cigarettes, and they would participate in a study that would look at the efficacy of different treatments and randomly assign people to either a delayed quit smoking group or to a different type of treatment group that would be like patch only and placebo pill, or placebo.
Right. So, yeah. Sure. So in this case, the change of behavior was clear cut. It was like to take people that were smoking and have them change their behavior to be a
people
person
who wanted
does not
to quit smoking. People who wanted to quit smoking. But the reality was, and this is where we get like the dissociation that made me interested in this problem and how powerful the solution was, is that the same people would spend thousands of dollars on tobacco cigarettes and not be able to quit even though they wanted to. And the reason is because they already had the money, right? Like it's just this like simple thing where it was like this external source doing the verification and doing like the motivation of the paying, right? And so it became like once you have control of like a bearer asset, right, or anything for that matter that has value such as paper money or something, you lose the ability, right, to be able to motivate yourself. And so that was always really interesting to me that like you could, so you could program, somebody could, to say every time I spend, every time I spend money or do a credit card transaction, like acorns is something where you like round up with every transaction you do. So you could do that, or you could do like every time I check out from the place that I buy tobacco cigarettes, then it'll charge me an extra $5. That $5 goes into hex. The hex gets, gets like behavior locked until my doctor gives me a token, that has been emailed to them, gives it back to me that says that I tested negative for nicotine so many times in a row or something, right?
Oh, wow. So you're talking about an infrastructure level thing, not just a little app on your phone that you'd use personally. And okay, that's a whole different level of what I thought.
That was just like, that was just like the first, right? Like that was the first, like how I got
idea.
exposed to this idea, to the broader idea of, oh, people might want to pay themselves, right, to change their own behaviors, because for a lot of behaviors, it could change if people were paid the right amount and already had the motivation because they're the ones, initiating it. And so
I've always found that when I'm the one that initiates it, then I'm also the one that can just de-initiate it, and it's just the ends. If it's not enforced externally,
which is where like the financial incentive comes in, right? That you've created for yourself by behavior locking your hex.
So I guess once it's locked, then we still come back to the Oracle problem, though.
So the Oracle problem, so that can be, so for example,
I just cheat my own system, and I just fall folly to the same issue that everyone that's trying to change a behavior, break an addiction or whatever. There's only that one time you fail, right? And then you start from zero again, which is better than not starting at all, of course, but it's the Oracle problem.
So there are different ways to fail, right? But there's there's only so many types of maybe.
Yeah, well, you just constrain it to whether you keep the plan you made or not. Just we don't need to get into all the different types of failure. It's just like you either have plans, stick to it or you don't.
So for behavioral activation, so somebody in hex says, oh, I have a tendency to get depressed from time to time, and so what I want to try is to start programming in behavioral strategies, right? Behavioral medicine that I'm choosing as an option from a menu that that could help me with this. And so I'm going to implement two different behavioral strategies. One is going to be that every time I check the price, the app that I'm using that I've opted into is going to give me a mental health mode where I have to pick one option for self-esteem. I have to esteem myself with a certain positive word before I check the price. And so that's rewarding me to, or it's conditioning me, right, to if the price keeps going up, to feel really good about praising myself. And that helps with one aspect. And then the behavioral activation aspect is, if I don't wear my Fitbit and I don't get a certain number of steps, right, logged into that system, then I don't get my money released. And so
I need to ask a question point blank in your face, like a slap in the face kind of a question, sort of. Do you believe that such things actually work? And if so, I'm sure that would be evidence-based. And and then the second question would be, in fact, I'm just going to assume that you believe it and that you do have plenty of evidence to support your belief. So the next question then is there any data that you're aware of on what kind of percentage of the population of people that sort of come into these programs or use these tools does it actually benefit and work for? There must be some percentage of people that it just, for whatever reason, because they're not disciplined or it just doesn't work for them or whatever, versus those that, hey, this program really helped me and blah, 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 blah.
The research is
what are
done
the stats?
so poorly. The research is done so poorly. Like I can speak to it, but I want to disclaim it with that. So
Sure.
just to give an example of that. So before I started working with somebody really brilliant in the nicotine and tobacco research area, what they did is they let people drop out of studies. And so they never really studied how bad people's withdrawal symptoms were because people weren't included in the data collection, because the people who found it hardest to quit smoking went back
Just dropped out.
and it was like only 30% of smokers were being studied in any study that was funded, like by NIH, by, you know, like they were being done in the literature, right, that got published. And so then somebody came along and said, oh, you know, like we need to use the right methods. And so that's when my mentor started paying people what was considered an extra amount of money to stay in the study. Even if they relapsed, they would still stay in the study and, you know, report how bad their symptoms were and everything. And that was enough evidence to cause the Surgeon General, right, to take notice and to start issuing warnings, because they didn't even know how bad smoking was for people at that point. Because it was thought that people could easily quit, because the only people who were being studied for quitting smoking were the people who found it easy to quit smoking. And so
yeah, I was just going to say my experience along that whole thing, just as a person out in the wild, is that there's basically two kinds of smokers: those who can quit and those who can't. You know, and of course there's a gray area in the between, and you know, so I'll rephrase it: those who find it relatively easy and those who find it near impossible.
Yeah. But that's not experimental, right? Because people are self-selecting based on any number of variables, right? And so it's totally bogus data if you're only looking at a fraction of the people who find it easiest to quit smoking, and you're assuming and you're pretending, right? Because the
well, yeah, I mean, and some people say they've quit, but they quit 3 times a week, you know.
Everybody found it easy to quit because they were
3 times a week. Yeah.
So
yeah.
So and what we were looking at as an advanced, right, like behavior change lab, was not how do we measure when it's easy for people or when it's hard for people, but to actually change, to have, you know, a change in people's behavior to make it, what makes it easier for this individual type of person to quit. And we were able to find that because we kept people in the study. We kept 80% of people by paying them an extra $500 to keep up, you know, with the research. And so what that is called, we were not studying that. We were trying to study quitting smoking. But what we ended up using in order to be able to even measure that, we used contingency management. And so that was the first time I was exposed to this field of research that you're asking about. And contingency management is actually it has the strongest effect size out of any intervention in psychology, including talk therapy.
Like it.
And so the talk therapy that we do,
well, but so I'm assuming it removes the
management.
Yeah, so contingency management, I haven't given you a chance to explain what that is, but my guess would be that it basically removes, or not removes, but replaces the whole you failed, you succeed thing with what to do in either situation, and have that still part of the thing, no? No?
It's paying people to stop using drugs or paying people to like
Oh,
exercise.
like literally?
Literally.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Wow.
That's
So,
what it,
so are you guys
so that
responsible for those
changes.
programs where they
No,
do that?
no, no.
Oh,
Well,
okay. I mean, you don't answer that. Don't answer that. Some people
So-
know who you are and where you live.
so the so the
sorry.
idea here
I'm so
though,
sorry.
right, is what if you combine crypto and contingency management? What if you take the thing that has the most powerful behavior change effect in psychology and you combine it with the thing that has the most transparency, self-sovereignty, like bearer asset, like lack of middlemen, right? Hex, right? Why don't you take something that is motivating like money and something that is changing behavior like contingency management?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, yeah, cool. Wow, I didn't think this was going to be so. Usually we find common ground, you and I, very quickly. But
Sure.
I'm struggling to find it here, which is fascinating. So again, that would be cool. But where I'm stuck is I don't believe this contingency management, as I understand it, is worth a damn. We had a program in schools where they would pay kids a couple of bucks to read a book each week or whatever it was as a trial, and it worked. And kids started fighting over the shortest, smallest books with the biggest letters and most pictures. It worked so well. In other words, it didn't work.
That's central planning. We know that doesn't work.
Oh, okay. So obviously, you need to explain more.
And quitting smoking is something that's so obvious. But if you give people a game to play where the game is give me the easiest book so I can get that's just people competing to play the game the way that the game was designed poorly.
Well, yeah, there was a bin of books, and you got to choose which book. Various different interests, and there were different reading skill levels in the classes and things. So they had to cater to that, and
they would give us stickers.
The smartest people got the dumbest books because they could get the $2 for the least effort, right? So anyway, contingency planning then. So I've obviously misrepresented what this contingency planning thing actually is.
Management.
Management. Yeah. So explain that to me a little bit more.
So contingency management is this intervention, right, in behavioral psychology where you're paying somebody in order to try to change one of their behaviors. So you're creating incentives, and so that it turns out is.
So how does it work though? So like they get paid if they affect the change, and they don't get paid if they don't, or they just get paid to be in the program period.
So if you're addicted to heroin and you test negative for heroin so many times in a row that's been agreed upon in a behavior contract, then you get whatever's specified as the reward in the behavior contract, which in this case might be your insurance company giving you $1,000.
Cool. So now you can go get some LSD. I mean, that was horribly cynical, but did the program follow up after that though? I mean, what do they do with that money that they get, and what happens afterwards? How far into that did it go? I'm really curious because.
So, I mean, this is a whole.
Very skeptical.
Right? This is a whole.
Yeah, I know, which makes it so positive because it seems to me that there must be a lot of data available, which is why I'm asking the questions. It's fascinating.
But look at the bigger idea though. Like people going to work and getting paid, like that's contingency management in some way, right? Like people are. No, it's not. People aren't being motivated by money to do something that they didn't want to do that like may or may not benefit them, right? Like,
well, I don't know. I mean, my relationship with money is different to the norm, but my personal experience with that is that it was more like having a gun pointed at my head, in that I had to have somewhere to live and food to eat. And if I didn't do what the person with the gun said I had to do...
You're talking about working?
Yeah, I was going to get shot. Now, I have been accused of being a little grandiose with my analogies in the past, but I swear to God, that's how it felt like to me. A job, specifically, working for someone else. Yeah.
We're talking about a behavior you want to change. You could pay yourself, and the psychology backs it up, but nobody wants to try it because it sounds so weird. Paying yourself. So
that's not the issue. I'm really, I feel bad because I feel like I'm obviously seriously projecting my own attitudes and sort of potentially faulty beliefs on this topic, which, I feel like the topic has real merit and the solution you're presenting does, but I don't believe in any of this stuff. I don't believe it.
People had to use Hex to understand it. Same thing with this.
All right, okay. So I understand that if you want to change a behavioral thing, a lot of behaviors that we have that we want to change exist because of the repeating pattern, the prevalence that the physical prevalence they have in the structure of our brains and the neural networks and and so on. And so in order to change the pattern, we introduce new patterns and give them enough time to grow and become physically present in the mind as well, which then gives the brain overall a chance to let one sort of grow while the other one wanes or not or whatever, and that the only way to make these things happen is through the exercise of actually doing these things. You can't just decide, I'm going to create a new pattern and have it spring up in your mind as a whole new neural network. That doesn't work like that. So
what happened in the example of people quitting tobacco smoking, I would imagine, who are getting paid, so they were getting tested every 2 days. Their breath, urine, blood wasn't, I don't think, every 2 days. So it's like your breath sample, your urine sample, and your saliva sample. And so we'd always catch people who smoked a cigarette. And so they knew that. They got trained ahead of time that they would get caught, and it was presented in a way that was really, not blaming. It was just we're going to measure you when you're still smoking, and we're going to show you how that's different than when you quit. And then we're going to keep doing that every 2 days to keep you seeing.
Yeah, it sounds good and professional. But surely what actually worked in the end for those that it did work with, and you probably don't know because the study had to have some time limit, is that it wasn't so much that they were being paid for it. Paying them for it was getting them to stick to the program. But for those who were able to quit, it would have been not the fact that they were being paid per se. It would have been the secondary effect of the secondary effect that their brain and their mind and their life and their experience that they had over the term of the program gave them the ability to experience what it's like to be not on that drug or whatever that thing was, smoking. And that gave them enough space, presumably, to then continue that same pattern going forward for some length of time until it didn't. So if that's true, and you just interrupt me anytime you decide, no, that's bollocks, then I can see how this mechanism of paying people to remain in the program is certainly, has very high utility because it keeps people on the program, right? And it also enables you as scientists to get more accurate data and to get more complete data. But it seems to me that surely it has to be that what actually worked in the end was that the people stuck to the program, whatever means was used to do that. And it seems hard to believe that the fact that the mechanisms used to do that, being money or any kind of reward basis, is what actually quote unquote cured them. They cured themselves by being given the opportunity to experience for long enough what it's like to not be owned by that addiction anymore. That would be my postulation, guess, based on my limited personal experience. Now, is that a bad thing? Does that say this doesn't work? No, of course not. So if I'm right about that, then certainly in HEX, by doing the same thing and by giving people in HEX the ability to set up a game thing where they get to experience the new behavior over a long enough period of time, and it's not so much the fact that they're getting paid the HEX, it's that getting paid the HEX kept them in the game long enough for them to experience the new pattern and be able to see that, indeed it was the thing they wanted, or not, in which case it would fail. That's what we're really talking about, right? Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're
okay.
talking about taking things that would work if
It's
people
about
tried
keeping it.
them.
It's about keeping them in the program. We're not saying that paying yourself hex is what's going to cure you. We're saying that coming up with gamified incentives to keep you in a program, in a pattern for a length of time, will give you the opportunity, your mind and
It's
your
literally
experiential self,
so like
the opportunity
literally
to
what we're
learn a new
talking
pattern.
about. Literally what we're talking about is like if you could program me to program you by using your money to pay you to change your behavior in any way that was agreed upon, right?
Sure. You know, so I come back to the question that I originally asked about: do we know that any of this stuff works?
Yes.
Even if people do stick to the program, because I know for an absolute fact that it absolutely does not work for me. It's pointless even trying. Because I'm the Oracle. And even if I'm not the Oracle, it's going to take a gun to my head.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
I'm not. That's projection. Okay, I want to be clear. That's projection. I'm saying that's
Yeah.
me. I don't want that to be misinterpreted as therefore it doesn't work for anyone and it's just stupid or anything
Yeah.
like that.
I
But I would
don't.
like a feel of like what percentage of people that have tried these kinds of things it
Well,
seems to
I
benefit.
don't think that you've tried what I'm talking about.
Does it matter that I haven't tried it?
Yes.
Well, the fact that I wouldn't try it, couldn't try it, could not bring myself to try it without a gun to my head is the point I'm making. But others out there surely will.
You've tried to change your behavior without
When I
money being
change my
involved.
when I change my behavior, I just change my behavior. That sounds rambunctious or whatever the word is, but you know, and it seldom happens because I seldom have the motivation or the need or the desire to change my behavior. So I used to smoke. One day I decided I wasn't going to smoke anymore, and I just stopped smoking. Did I feel withdrawal things? Yeah. Did I get headaches?
I
Yeah.
have
All that kind
like
of stuff.
I don't
But
think we
that's
can get into
me.
that because
No. We can't
there's a
because it's
lot
different.
more. There's a
There's,
lot more that I could help like people
but it's.
understand.
I'm just saying.
But
I'm just
but
saying. I'm just
so
saying.
you giving
That's.
such a specific example and you're already sure that it didn't work, like is not really you
No.
trying to think like how it would work, right?
No. That's not what I said. You said, well, no, forget who said what said. I'm not saying that I've tried these programs and I've stuck them through to the end and they did not work. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that the idea of these programs has been presented to me before and they've been a non-starter because I think they just won't work for me. It's like knowing all the God mode tricks in a game, you know, all the God codes, you know, to get into God mode and trying to play the game without using any of them. At some point, you just get frustrated and just screw it, God mode. Got to get past this boss. Want to play the next level. I wouldn't. I just simply wouldn't make it through. I wouldn't. Because I'm trying to manipulate myself into being manipulated by someone who's agreed to manipulate me. It's just what doesn't work for me. Now again, I'm not saying obviously this can work for other people.
For a really long time,
Yeah.
and so
I'm just saying that I want to understand it,
this
but I
is
can't
not really
understand it through my
helping.
own
I don't
lens.
think that this is really helping like the audience to really like see the potential.
Oh
of
yeah, the
idea.
audience. Sorry, audience.
Yeah, and so it's like, you know,
So the potential of the idea
for me, if you have a question for me about like how something could work, or like maybe you don't understand something, and
I think we've established that.
I'm not really getting to explain the whole thing because we keep going on these like side conversations.
I'm sorry. I thought we'd explained it, and I thought I'd repeated it back so that you know, and that you'd agreed that, you know, I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I'm not saying it shouldn't work. I'm just saying that I don't. I genuinely seek additional understanding. I'm not trying to talk the whole thing down. That's why I keep saying me personally, and I'm only projecting. And you know,
but we're okay. Yeah.
So I'm just trying to get a feel for if there's any data on, you know, how effective it is and
There's
stuff. And,
a lot of data. It's effective. And
cool.
people don't have to want to change. They have to be in the environment, right, that gives them the tools to change, right? So it's this whole idea that you have to want to change and then you'll change is backwards.
Well, no, that
Because
I don't believe that. Of course not. You have to
yeah,
want to
because
change and act. You can't. But if you
don't have
definitely
to
don't want
to
to change,
you
if you
don't have
definitely
to want
don't
to
want
change.
to change, then how can you even begin to even think about changing if you definitely don't want to change? Which is different to, well, it's irrelevant anyway, because the thing that we're talking about, I mean, obviously, the only people that are going to engage with it are people that do want to change. So, I mean, you know, it's a moot point that I'm making. Because in the honest context, of course, those aren't the people.
We're not really getting to like the point of like the reason to program mental health into money is so that people aren't choosing. So it's just, so what you're choosing, right, is you're choosing the implementation of that, right? But the money is already nudging you in a way that's better than a centralized actor like deciding things for you. So if people are in a healthier monetary environment, then they're going to have fewer mental health problems. If people are paying themselves to change behaviors that they want to change, right? Those are the assumptions. So giving examples of like you don't want to change, right? Like that doesn't fit into the category of this idea
which
of
is
paying
that's the point I realized,
paying
yeah.
yourself. And so that's what I really wanted to explore is in the circumstance that somebody wants to motivate themselves but doesn't have the motivation. So that's a little bit different than like wanting to change or not wanting to change. It really gets into like, so can you change? And you don't know if you can change unless you try, and you can't try unless you have the right tools, and you don't have the right tools because you didn't think you could, right? And so it just becomes this circle. And I've gone through this circle like 11,000 hours, and so I'm just like, I'm telling you,
sure.
like we need to run the experiment in Hex, but we've already been running it and it's working out super awesome for everybody, except it's working out so well, and people are delaying gratification so well, and then obsessing about when they don't do it perfectly, and then they're upset. Like there's all these just like little tiny things that need to be cleaned up. Like, so you could pay yourself to not stake perfectly, to have like a 0.0000001% error, right? You could pay yourself to burn one hex, and then
you absolutely could, and it would be a fun game to play, and it would work, and I'm sure a lot of people would love it. But surely they have to decide that they want to do that in the first place. And I just don't understand how, if you have to decide that you want to do it in the first place, then why do you need the game? Just make the damn decision and do it. I'm sorry, man. I didn't want this to. I'm obviously putting a real negative spin on it. I can hear the frustration in your voice, and it's not my intention to argue against it, or because you've proven time and time again that you know your shit when it comes to this stuff, and hell, you've helped me, right? Just in general conversation. So I've got a lot of respect for your knowledge and your background and everything, and despite what I'm saying, I feel like you're onto something good here. It's just that I personally, at this time, rationally, have some misunderstandings or whatever. But hey, I'm all for it. I mean, I can't see it can do any harm. But obviously, I'm going to have to work harder to really understand, where it's at and how I can make it work. That's all.
Sure. Yeah. Here's a good comment from Ricky saying, like, whenever I buy Pokemon cards or go out to eat, then I'd charge myself more and turn it into Hex. That's a good idea.
I didn't even know we had people in chat. I'm so sorry.
Yes.
I
there have probably been hundreds of people listening in over time, but about 50 to 100 at a time. And
wow.
Yeah, I think people are so we'll have to find a way to talk about this, because I think it's valuable, and I think like our talk has been valuable. because we're trying to drill into game theory, right? And so it's people who make progress in game theory usually are having these types of discussions for many more hours than we can do in a row.
Oh, for sure.
But are
I'll tell you what, Matty,
also
too.
trying
Matty.
to help people in the community to start having the right conversations.
Look, the idea that there might be a way for me to actually program and set up situations that actually practically work and make sense for me to change some behaviors that I'd like to change, if that's even possible, hell yes, I want to explore that.
It is.
I just don't believe it at the moment. I just have to say that's where I'm at right now. For me.
No
Just
worries.
for me. I've seen these kinds of therapies work wonders for other people. I have family members who say, they put me on this program, they did this thing, it was so good, you should try it, and da-da-da-da-da. I don't doubt it. It's my personal understanding. That's all I've been talking about here. And if I'm going to be part of trying to implement this, then obviously I need to understand it. So,
cool. Yeah, and I know people like it when we debate and go in circles. And I'm not being sarcastic. It makes for a good show. So I appreciate everybody for tuning in. David, really, really good to see you there in the chat. And so we will, we'll pick this up in the future and be able to maybe practice some examples, and people can always contact me at allmylinks.com/allin if you have any ideas as to ways to program mental health into money. Check out the link in the description below for the article that describes kind of the idea here of paying your future self for behavior change, and how that could come to fruition and be able to kind of revolutionize, right, the ability for people to get mental health in a decentralized way, in a way that's free, in a way that that is making humans more productive and happier because they're choosing their own motivation and programming their own behaviors. So stay tuned for that. And let's see. Any final words, Future?
I just looked at this little red clock up here. It says 3:25 in some second. Have we been doing this for 3 hours and 26 minutes?
Yes.
OMG. Well, there's a behavior I should probably think about changing right away. Being more cognizant of the amount of time I'm spending talking.
Perfect.
All right. No, it's been fun. It's been fun, and
likewise.
We got deep, and it's one of us is going to come out understanding more than we did, and that'll probably be both of us. So that's good.
I definitely agree. I can already tell it's been helpful. Thank you for allowing me, really to just ramble on and explore my own thoughts and kind of see what comes out of it. So.
Cool. All right, everybody. Wow.
All right.
Whew.
I might do an outro after all that. And
you got an outro. Cool. Let's do an outro.
Everybody, stake wisely, my friends.
Cheers.
Oh, I didn't hit the end button yet because people were saying it was a great stream. So thanks, everybody, and we will catch you next time.